Chapter 1255. At this time, the Sichuan emperor had already rushed to Xiao Ran's palace. As soon as he entered the inner hall, he saw all the imperial physicians surrounding the bed. When they heard the words, "Your Majesty is here," they immediately dispersed and knelt down to salute. The Sichuan emperor didn't care about this at all. He immediately asked, "How is the fourth prince?" The fourth prince vomited blood because of his heart disease. But it's good that he vomited blood. Now that the fourth prince has woken up, Your Majesty can visit him. Imperial Physician Li, the most senior imperial physician in the Imperial Academy of Medicine, stood out to answer on behalf of the emperor. The Sichuan emperor immediately breathed a sigh of relief. At this time, Consort Yu arrived. She looked very flustered and anxious. When she saw the Sichuan emperor, she immediately walked over. "Your Majesty, how is Ranner?" "I rushed over as soon as I heard that he vomited blood." The Sichuan emperor patted her trembling hand and comforted her. The imperial physician said that he has woken up. At this time, Imperial Physician Li faced the two of them and said, Your Majesty, although the fourth prince is fine today, his heart disease still needs to be cured. If it goes on like this, no matter how good the fourth prince's body is, he won't be able to withstand such torment. So, Your Majesty, please persuade the fourth prince to relax and not think too much. Otherwise, even if he takes too much medicine, it will be useless. Imperial Physician Li was very important in the Imperial Academy of Medicine. His medical skills were recognized by the Sichuan emperor and the imperial concubines. Now that they heard what he said, they understood the seriousness of the matter. Consort Yu was on the verge of collapsing. She had been highly stressed these 2 days and hadn't had much rest. Her face suddenly turned pale. Seeing this, the Sichuan emperor immediately ordered people to help her to the side. Imperial Physician Li also immediately stepped forward to check her pulse. After a while, Imperial Physician Li withdrew his hand and turned to the Sichuan emperor, saying, Your Majesty, the imperial concubine is fine. She's just overworked and tense. Once her mood swings, she'll feel dizzy. She'll be fine after 2 days of rest. Sichuan emperor nodded and turned to hold Consort Yu's hand. He looked into her eyes and said, I will take care of Ranner's matters. I guarantee that he will be cured. So you can rest assured and go back to rest. If you collapse, what will happen to Ranner in the future? With Sichuan emperor's words, Consort Yu quickly perked up. She nodded and tightly grasped Sichuan emperor's hand. Tears slowly flowed down her cheeks. Then I'll rely on Your Majesty. When a beauty shed tears, I felt pity for her. In addition, showing weakness and dependence at the right time would inflate a man's pity and desire to protect. This was one of the reasons why Consort Yu was able to stand alone in the harem. Sichuan emperor rubbed the back of her hand and sent someone to escort her back to the Moon Palace. At this moment, eunuch Chao had already cleared everyone away. Only the West Xian emperor and Xiao Ran, who was lying on the bed, remained in the palace. Sichuan emperor stood in the center of the palace and pondered for a while. Then he slowly walked to the bed and sat down. Xiao Ran heard the noise and slowly opened his eyes. He looked very weak. He looked at his father with dim eyes and said weakly, Imperial father, I am useless. I've made you worry. I am too unfilial. Sichuan emperor listened to his self-blame and said, You also know that you're useless and unfilial? Xiao Ran nodded with a gloomy expression. Then do you know where you're useless? Where are you unfilial? Sichuan emperor asked. Xiao Ran was stunned. Then he said, Sichuan emperor didn't wait for his reply and continued, You're useless because you know what you want, but you don't fight for it. You hide in your room like a coward. You're unfilial because of your cowardice. You don't eat or drink because of a woman. You've made imperial father and your imperial mother worried endlessly. At this point, the West Xian emperor sighed softly. Ran, you're good at everything, but you're not decisive enough. You're overcautious and overcautious. Sometimes, you just need to have the courage to press forward and cut off all means of retreat. Do you understand? Xiao Ran lowered his eyes. He felt that his imperial father's words were very reasonable. He was just too weak. Kind people are bullied, and kind horses are ridden. If you only think about others and think about many things, but don't dare to take action, then you can only look up to others' happiness. You'll be restless and yearning for it. It's like a mirage tempting people who get lost in the desert. You can see it but you can't touch it. The Shi Xian emperor said somewhat resentfully. His son was good in every way, except that he was not ruthless enough or tough enough. He was too different from the Shi Xian emperor of the past. The more Xiao Ran listened, the more he felt that he was useless and couldn't do anything well. Just as he was feeling very depressed, he suddenly heard his imperial father speak. Ranner, imperial father wants to ask you a question. Do you really like Chu Qingyan that much? Xiao Ran abruptly raised his head and looked at his imperial father's serious face. He was a bit nervous, but at this moment, a voice in his heart urged him to tell the truth. Thus, he nodded heavily. I am sincere about Qingyan. Good. Sichuan Emperor nodded. Xiao Ran was a bit confused by his imperial father's sudden mention of this topic. He was even more confused when he saw his imperial father's reaction. He hesitated for a moment before asking, Imperial father, what do you mean? Sichuan Emperor stared at him, revealing an unreadable emotion. If you really want Chu Qingyan, then Imperial father can agree to your previous request. Really? Xiao Ran was so excited that he immediately sat up on the bed. However, because he used too much strength, he couldn't stop coughing. Sichuan Emperor saw him like this and shook his head even more helplessly. He took a pillow and placed it behind his back for him to lean on to help him breathe. When will you change this bad habit? Xiao Ran said apologetically. Because what Imperial Father said made I too excited and shocked. He paused and carefully looked at his Imperial Father's expression and asked, then, what Imperial Father said just now, is it true? Sichuan Emperor originally wanted to scare him, but when he saw his bloodshot eyes and sickly face, he couldn't bear to. He could only say, yes, Imperial Father agrees to cancel the engagement between your eldest brother and Chu Qingyan. Xiao Ran couldn't restrain the joy in his heart. A smile bloomed on his face. Many thanks, Imperial Father. Imperial Father really loves I too much. Thank you, Sichuan Emperor shook his head. This child, however, at this moment, Xiao Ran thought of something and looked worriedly at Sichuan Emperor. Imperial Father, will this have a negative impact on you? You were the one who issued the imperial edict. If you take it back after 5 years, will the civil and military officials have any objections? How will you explain this to eldest brother? Isn't it too late to think of this now? Sichuan Emperor chuckled and shook his head. Xiao Ran rubbed his nose and smiled somewhat childishly. At this moment, Sichuan Emperor slowly restrained his expression and said to him coldly, of course, Imperial Father won't announce this matter personally. Instead, I will have your eldest brother bring it up himself. Chapter 1256. Xiao Ran blinked and asked curiously, then why did Imperial Father ask Imperial Brother to bring it up? Sichuan Emperor smiled mysteriously. You don't need to know. You only need to know that Imperial Father will help you achieve your wish. Although Imperial Father didn't tell him, Xiao Ran cared more about the time when the engagement was annulled, so he quickly put it to the back of his mind. He couldn't suppress his joy. Seeing his youngest son grinning foolishly, Sichuan Emperor felt the need to remind him. He said in a cold and solemn tone, Ranner, Imperial Father doesn't object to you taking Chu Qingyan into the palace in the future. But Imperial Father says that you will have a concubine. Although the position of Imperial concubine is still available, Imperial Father doesn't allow you to put Chu Qingyan above the position of Imperial concubine. Xiao Ran was stunned. Why? Seeing his reaction, Sichuan Emperor knew that he was too naive. He said with a serious face, you have a bright future ahead of you. You still have a long way to go. Your position of imperial concubine should be reserved for someone who can help you greatly in the future, or her family. It's the same for your position of concubine. But Chu Qingyan doesn't meet these conditions. But Qingyan is very talented, smart, and skilled in martial arts. She's a very outstanding girl. Xiao Ran couldn't help but argue for her. Sichuan Emperor shook his head and said, as your future imperial concubine or concubine, she doesn't need to be particularly outstanding. She only needs to have a strong family, a strong network of connections, and a good temperament to help her husband and raise her children. They only need to take care of you and care for you when you're busy and tired. That's enough. He thought of Chu Qingyan and the intelligence report he read today. He said in a calm tone, a woman's virtue is to have no talent. Even if Chu Qingyan is talented, the imperial concubine can't interfere in politics. You have many guards and secret guards around you. You don't need her to do anything if you encounter danger. Xiao Ran didn't agree with Imperial Father's words, but he couldn't find a reason to refute. Moreover, his attention had shifted to other things. Imperial Father, you just said that the imperial concubine can't interfere in politics? Hearing his youngest son's surprised tone, Sichuan Emperor knew that he had let it slip. But it was only a matter of time. It was better to tell him early so he could be prepared. Then, he wouldn't have to be immersed in his feelings. Thus, he nodded and said in a serious tone, you are Imperial Father's chosen successor, so you can't decide on your own marriage. Imperial Father can only satisfy your needs to the greatest extent. Therefore, Chu Qingyan can't be the Empress Dowager in the future. She can be one of the 4 consorts. You can decide where you want her to be. Imperial Father won't interfere. Xiao Ran's eyes widened. Even though his lady mother had always instilled in him to work hard and inherit the throne, he always felt that it was an unattainable goal. Now that he heard Imperial Father's words, he couldn't believe it. But isn't there still eldest brother? He is the legitimate eldest son. His youngest son was still as muddle-headed as ever. Even after so many years, he still did not understand how much effort the West Xian the Arch had put into nurturing him. The West Xian the Arch was also afraid that his youngest son would not be able to wrap his head around Chu Qingyan's matter and insist on doing so. The West Xian the Arch pondered for a moment. Since the topic had reached this point, there was nothing to hide anymore. Do you know why Imperial Father bestowed a marriage between your eldest brother and Chu Qingyan? Asked Sichuan Emperor. Xiao Ran calmed his heart and thought carefully. Then, he raised his head and replied, it seems to be because Imperial Grandfather divined that eldest brother would be in trouble and needed a woman to help him overcome the tribulation. In the end, he chose Qingyan. Sichuan Emperor shook his head. Xiao Ran was shocked. Could there be other reasons? Sichuan Emperor nodded. There was a strange smile at the corner of his mouth, as if he was mocking and proud. Your imperial grandfather was just making things up. None of his divinations were accurate. But why didn't Imperial Father stop your imperial grandfather and help him issue that imperial edict? It wasn't because he was pestered to the point of no return. It was because Imperial Father needed someone to block your eldest brother's drive. At that time, he was invincible. Many of the powers in the court were leaning towards the left Prime Minister's faction. In order to balance the powers, Imperial Father listened to your Imperial Grandfather's absurd suggestion and chose the Chu family, which had no foundation and was gradually declining. Xiao Ran was shocked beyond words. At this moment, he heard his Imperial Father continue. As your eldest brother's first consort, Chu Qingyan suppressed your eldest brother's power to a certain extent. If he wants to be an emperor, he must have 3 powerful forces. The first is his own family. The second is the party that supports him in the court. The third is the support from the emperor's harem. When Chu Qingyan was betrothed to your eldest brother, the shrewd people in the court sensed that Imperial Father didn't think highly of this prince. Because Imperial Father cut off his most powerful source of power in the future, they needed to consider whether they should continue to support your eldest brother. Over the past 5 years, Imperial Father has secretly nurtured a force for you so that you can walk a smoother path in the future. At this moment, Xiaoran was still digesting the Sichuan Emperor's words. He felt that everything was beyond his expectations. Xian Emperor lightly patted the back of his hand, then sighed and said, "Do you still remember when you were young, you asked Imperial Father why Imperial Father doted on your Imperial Mother so much, but she wasn't the Empress?" Xiaoran was startled. Then, he said somewhat embarrassedly, "I was young at that time. Children's words carry no harm. Imperial Father, please don't take it to heart." The Sichuan Emperor smiled gently and said, "It doesn't matter. But now, Imperial Father can tell you the reason. When Imperial Father was still a prince, his power wasn't strong enough. He needed a strong external aid. So, Imperial Father chose the Liang family and let your mother down." Speaking of this, the Sichuan Emperor revealed a faint helplessness. "So, when you want to achieve great things, you have to make sacrifices and feel indebted. You can't put your preferences on the table. You have to accept a lot of things you don't want because these things can help you get what you want. So, those who want to achieve great things don't care about trifles." Xiaoran suddenly felt that the Imperial Father in front of him seemed to have changed a lot. His eyes were filled with pain as he said, "Imperial Father, you are a very capable and competent emperor." The Sichuan Emperor smiled and said self-deprecatingly, "But Imperial Father is not a good husband or a good father." Then, he stopped smiling and said with emotion, "But there is one thing. The more you care about someone, the more you can't put them in a dangerous position. For example, the position of the emperor in the palace is tedious and enviable. So, after all these years, Imperial Father has become powerful enough. Your grandfather's faction also has an unshakable position in the imperial court. That's why Imperial Father didn't support your mother to be the empress." Xiaoran nodded. The position of the emperor in the palace was indeed too difficult and tiring. The Sichuan Emperor patted him on the shoulder and said earnestly, "If you want to get what you want, you have to be ruthless to yourself. However, only when you sit in the highest position can you get what you want most." Xiaoran pursed his lips and thought of Qingyan. If he wanted her to stay by his side forever, he had to be like Imperial Father. He had to make himself stronger and stronger until no one could shake him. Chapter 1257. After the Sichuan Emperor left, the palace regained its silence. Xiaoran sat on the bed with his hands folded on top of the quilt. He stared blankly at an unknown place, but his mind was replaying the words his father had said before he left. "Ranner, you are too kind. This is both a strength and a fatal weakness. So from today onwards, you have to think more about your own interests. Don't always think about others. If you want something, fight for it. You have the capital and the ability. Sometimes it is necessary to use some means. As long as you can achieve your goal, the process is not important. So I said this to you today because I want you to know the heavy responsibility on your shoulders. So in the future, you have to consciously adjust your attitude. You are different from everyone else. You will be the ruler of the entire country in the future. You have to set your sights further and not just focus on what is in front of you. Kill Buddha if you meet Buddha, kill Buddha if you meet God if you meet God. Everyone who stands in your way must be eliminated." Xiaoran slowly digested the Sichuan Emperor's words. Because his father had promised him that he would let him take Qingyan into the palace, and because his father had been the person he had respected the most since he was a child, he believed what his father had said today without a doubt. His previous depression and loneliness were slowly swept away. His eyes shone with an amazing light, and his aura changed. Those who were familiar with him would find that there was a sharp look in his eyes, as if he was a tiger cub that had just been enlightened and had its own sharp claws. If anyone stood in his way, he would get rid of them all. At this time, the Sichuan Emperor was on his way back. "Your Majesty, do you need a palanquin?" Eunuch Chao asked. The Sichuan Emperor waved his hand. "No need. It's good to take a walk." "Yes. Chao Ji, do you think Ranner can understand what I mean? The Sichuan emperor looked at the distant horizon. The sky was clear and the clouds were drifting. Qiao Ji was slightly stunned. When the emperor said those words to the fourth prince in the palace, he was beside him. At that time, he wanted to dig a hole and hide in it. Because every word he heard was about the secrets of the royal family, about the future of the Sichuan emperor, and the selection of the crown prince. If it were to spread, any word could cause turmoil in the court. Eunuch Chao lowered his head slightly and said with certainty, I think the fourth prince is very smart. He should be able to understand. Love could make a person grow, but it could also make a person fall. He couldn't guess what the fourth prince would become, but when he left the palace, he saw that the fourth prince's aura had changed. He didn't know what kind of change this would bring, good or bad, but he couldn't help but feel worried for his royal highness. The emperor was a man of his words. When he received the news today, he was extremely angry about Chu Qingyan's actions in Liancheng and on the battlefield. He believed that the King of England could deceive his superiors and his subordinates, so he would definitely do something disgraceful or even rebel in the future. Moreover, the emperor had been very wary of the King of England since this morning and kept an eye on him at all times. Now that this had happened, it was like the seeds that had been planted had finally sprouted. Then, it was time to cut the weeds and eliminate the roots. Eunuch Chao sighed softly in his heart. In fact, His Royal Highness shouldn't have returned to the capital. He should have gone far away. Qiao Ji, do you know why I want to break off the engagement between the two of them? The Sichuan Emperor's unexpected words made Eunuch Chao very confused. I don't know. A gust of wind blew and lifted the corner of the dragon robe. The flying dragon on the robe seemed to be alive as it shuttled through the clouds. Its sharp eyes seemed to be looking down at the people below. It was cold and majestic, but also ferocious and cruel, making people not dare to look directly at it. Chu Qingyan was able to help Su with strategizing and leading the army in battle. It proves that she is a very courageous woman. In Sichuan, there are few women like her. She is good at both civil and military affairs and has the demeanor of a general. Ranner is not decisive enough and lacks someone to guide him. Chu Qingyan is just right for the job. Although he couldn't tolerate Chu Qingyan's crime of deceiving the emperor, he appreciated her talent. Moreover, Ranner liked her very much. If she could stay by Ranner's side and help him, then he would be able to hand over the country to him. As the emperor's father, he would be at ease. This was also the reason why he didn't immediately condemn the two of them at the beginning. When he betrothed Chu Qingyan to Su he didn't find anything special about this woman. Now, he realized that keeping her by Su's side would be the biggest disaster. Although it wasn't very kind of him to do this, he had to do it for the sake of Sichuan's country and for Ranner. Eunuch Chao waited for a long time after he finished speaking, but His Majesty didn't answer. He couldn't help but look up. At this time, Sichuan Emperor said faintly, "You don't need to know the answer." Eunuch Chao immediately lowered his head. Yes. Let's go back to the palace. His bright yellow figure gradually disappeared into the distance. In the study of Prince Yi's estate, Xiao Ho was reviewing the account books that had recently been sent to him by the shops below. Because revenge required a lot of manpower and resources, he had many businesses under his control. The profits he earned were basically used to support his secret organization. Soldiers were trained for 1,000 days to be used in a single day. He looked at the thick pile of account books in front of him and suddenly thought of Pang Zhijing's silly smile. He couldn't help but have an idea. Didn't this little rascal like money? I'll let her do as much as she wants. When she enters the prince's estate, I'll let her take care of these businesses. He could even imagine her crying face when she came to him. He could not help but curl his lips slightly. With that thought, his head that had been slightly dizzy from drinking earlier immediately cleared up. He was no longer as tired as before. Just when he was about to continue reviewing the account books, one of the spies he had sent out returned to the estate and appeared before him. What's the matter? Xiao Ho placed down the book in his hand and looked at his subordinate with a slight frown. Normally, they would not show themselves so easily unless it was something major, just to avoid being discovered. Yahweh, the weapons we secretly forged in Qingyang City have been exposed. An official led a group of people to conduct a routine inspection and accidentally found our items. Right now, all of the craftsmen have been locked up in prison and are currently being interrogated. I wonder if they'll keep their mouths shut, the spy said with some worry. Xiao Ho was surprised. If they could even be discovered like this, just what were the craftsmen doing down there? The officials in Qingyang City are all father's people. They're completely impenetrable, and we can't use their connections. If we're discovered, it'll be extremely bad for us. The spy was rather frantic. Yahweh, what do we do now? Have the people under Luo Qingyang personally infiltrate the prison of Qingyang with people. You have to eliminate them completely. However, be careful not to be discovered. Xiao Ho ordered coldly. The spy immediately nodded and retreated. If this matter was not handled properly, everything he had done in the past few years would probably be exposed. Xiao Ho's eyes were like ink on the table, so thick that they refused to dissolve. Chapter 1258. Someone barged into the King of England's residence early in the morning. I heard that Yan Luo is back. Where is she? The moment Hua Xiaoli entered the courtyard, she began to look left and right. Only when Chu Qingyan opened the door and leaned against the door frame, looking at her coldly, did Hua Xiaoli run over and repeat her actions. Chu Qingyan looked at her friend who was extremely excited and said faintly, "You're the only one who would disturb someone's sleep early in the morning." Hua Xiaoli chuckled. I was just too excited when I heard that Yan Luo was back. I couldn't control myself. She couldn't help but raise her eyebrows. I didn't see you this excited when you saw me previously. It seems like you're treating me differently. At this moment, Hua Luo rubbed her nose in her sleeves as a crafty glint flashed across her eyes. She moved closer to Chu Qingyan and whispered, "You don't know, but I've been so busy recently. You have your big ice cube protecting you, so I can't touch you. But Yan Luo is here, and she can share some of my burden. How can I not be excited? I'm dying of laughter when I think about it." I see. I was wondering why you were so nice to me all of a sudden. It turns out that you've set up a trap for me to jump into. Hua Xiaoli, you've become bolder recently. Aren't you worried that you won't be able to laugh after I insert a needle into your body? A voice came from the side, carrying with it an eerie chill. She shuddered in her sleeves and slowly turned around. The corners of her mouth curled up as she smiled at the newcomer. Yan Luo, you're finally back. I've missed you so much. I think you're trying to drag me down with you. Cheng Yan Luo walked out slowly and snorted at Hua Xiaoli. Hua Xiaoli quickly went up to her and tried to please her. Chu Qingyan smiled at the two of them. Since you're up so early, why don't we have breakfast together? Okay. No problem. I'm starving. You deserve it. The three of them sat down together. Xining and Jasper began to serve the dishes. Yan Luo, you look so pleased with yourself. Is something good about to happen? Hua Xiao's eyes were sharp. She could tell at a glance that she was different from before. Cheng Yan Luo glanced at her. You're indeed a good businesswoman. You're so observant. Of course. Otherwise, how could this lady have a foothold in this brothel? You speak as if you're not a profiteer. Ah, are you planning to go against me today? Chu Qingyan couldn't help but feel amused as she listened to their battle of words. It had been a long time since she last saw such a scene. After arguing for a while, Hua Xiao turned to Chu Qingyan and said, "Aren't you leaving the capital for Lianqing in 2 days? I found that your fief is also a great business opportunity. When the time comes, we can open a few branches there and try to spread our products all over the country." Before Chu Qingyan could say anything, Cheng Yan Luo asked in surprise, "You're going back to Lianqing?" "Yes, the capital isn't suitable for living here. Big Ice Cube and I plan to leave after a few days when he's relieved of his burden." Chu Qingyan nodded. "If I'd known, Murong and I would have returned to our fief directly. Now we have to hurry. Oh my god. Cheng Yenluo couldn't help but wail. It's no big deal. You can stay and help me. Hua Xiu winked at her and tried her best to invite her. Ugly. I refuse. Cheng Yenluo crossed her chest. Hua Xiu snorted loudly. After listening to their bickering, Chu Qingyan said to her good friend, Yenluo, I'm very surprised that you're back this time. I happen to have a friend who has some issues with her body. When she comes back, you can help her take a look and see what's wrong with her. Cheng Yenluo agreed readily. No problem. Recently, I've only been looking at Murong, and I'm a little tired of looking at beautiful women. I'm looking for a beauty to please my eyes. Chu Qingyan burst into laughter and teased, are you treating someone's illness or admiring a beauty? Aren't you afraid that Ethereal will come and take you away? He wouldn't dare. Cheng Yenluo smacked the table lightly and snorted. Hua Xiu blinked when she saw this scene. Looks like Ethereal is going to marry a tigress in the future. Hua Xiu, if you don't want to live anymore, I'll take out my silver needles at any moment, Cheng Yenluo threatened. Hua Xiu stuck her tongue out at her fearlessly. Cheng Yenluo stood up and reached out to her. Hua Xiu dodged her hand and immediately ran toward the courtyard. Cheng Yenluo was not to be outdone and immediately chased after her. Thus, the two of them started a chase in the courtyard. Chu Qingyan smiled as she stirred the porridge in her bowl with a spoon. As she listened to the laughter outside, she felt that the years were peaceful. How great would it be if her life could be as carefree and happy as this in the future? Later on, she realized that before all the disasters came, these peaceful times were worth cherishing and reminiscing. In Prince Yi's estate. Lord, we've dealt with those craftsmen. And we did it very cleanly, the subordinate reported as he knelt on the ground. Xiao Ho nodded. You did well. However, after entering the prison last night, I discovered that there's still one craftsman on the list who hasn't been caught. I've already sent people to search for him. As long as he's still in Qingyang City, we'll definitely find him, the subordinate continued. With that, Xiao Ho's expression became rather unsightly. I'm not afraid of not being able to find him. I'm just afraid that someone else will find him before us. This will be extremely disadvantageous for us. Find that craftsman before the soldiers as soon as possible. Don't make any mistakes. Yes, sir. The subordinate immediately backed off. Just as Xiao Ho's head ached over this matter, a pair of hands suddenly appeared from behind him, covering his eyes. Afterwards, she pinched his throat and said, "Guess who I am?" The ice-cold hands pressed against his eyes, taking away the annoyance in his head. It suddenly stabilized his emotions. Somewhere she could not see, he curled the corner of his lips slightly. A dumb and stupid cat. Who's dumb and stupid? Pang Zhijing broke down and grumbled unhappily. Only after saying that did she return to her senses. She released her hands while mumbling, I fell for it. You sure are sly. That's because you couldn't keep your cool. You can't blame anyone else. Xiao Ho smiled gently. She curled her lips. If it were not for the fact that she saw him sitting there in a bad mood when she first came in, she would never have done something so stupid to make him happy. Afterwards, she thought of something and mentioned it in a seemingly casual manner. I saw a few unfamiliar girls in the king's estate earlier. They're quite pretty. Who are they? In the beginning, Xiao Ho didn't understand. It wasn't until she finished speaking that he remembered that he was going to give them to a few officials. The words of explanation spun around in his mouth, but he didn't say it because it wasn't suitable for her to know about these things. He raised an eyebrow and said indifferently, that's not something you should concern yourself with. That made her heart clench, as if several needles had pierced her heart. Chapter 1259. Pang Zhijing lowered her eyes. From an angle that Xiao Ho couldn't see, her lips curled into a self-deprecating smile. Sure enough, she was still an insignificant person drifting outside of his world. Even though they had been getting along so well recently, it was useless. He could play with her today, and he could laugh and talk with other women tomorrow. In this era, the last thing that men lacked was women. Why did she have to humiliate herself here? She suddenly felt that everything here was suffocating. She didn't want to stay any longer. Thus, she said calmly, "I'm leaving." She turned to leave as soon as she finished speaking, but her wrist was grabbed by someone the moment she took a step. Xiaoho couldn't see her face clearly, but he keenly sensed that something was wrong with her mood. He asked in confusion, "You just arrived and you're already leaving. Where are you going?" "Someone invited me for tea." Before she came, Qing Yan had sent someone to inform her that there was a friend who wanted her to meet. However, she missed him a little, so she came to Prince Yi's residence first. They had originally arranged to meet in the afternoon, but now she didn't want to stay here to freeload lunch, much less accompany him. Upon hearing this, Xiaoho's expression turned slightly cold. "Is it Yu Qingxi?" Recently, his men had been reacting. Yu Qingxi's men had been keeping an eye on the relay station. He didn't need to think to know that he was watching her. He couldn't help but recall that day on the street. His tone and demeanor towards her were so ambiguous. His heart instantly felt uncomfortable. Pang Zhijing chuckled and said, "What does it have to do with you who I do what with?" Her nonchalant tone displeased him. His expression immediately turned cold as he said, "Didn't I tell you not to get close to him? He's not who you think he is. Don't tell me you've forgotten about the consecutive assassinations last time. Being with him is no different from being a lamb in a tiger's den." At this moment, she was in a very irritable mood. When she heard his questioning voice, Pang Zhijing felt a nameless fire erupt from her heart. She fiercely flung his hand away. With her back still facing him, she said, "That's my business. You don't have to interfere." Her entire body was filled with resistance towards him. Xiaoho narrowed his eyes, and his tone became even more impolite. "Could it be that you've rekindled your old feelings for him and forgotten the pain after the scar healed? I didn't expect you to be such a person. If I had known earlier, I would have left you there to fend for yourself. It would have been much better than shamelessly going up there now." Pang Zhijing suddenly turned around. Her heart was full of anger, but when she saw his mocking expression, it was as if a bucket of cold water had been poured over her head. She suddenly felt that there was no point in arguing. "Yes, I've forgotten the pain after the scar healed. I should have left myself to fend for myself. You can think whatever you want. I hate you." After saying that, she turned around and ran away. The tears in her eyes couldn't stop flowing down. Since he had such a bad impression of her, she didn't want him to see her in her worst state. She didn't want him to laugh at her. Yes, she had forgotten the pain after the wound healed. His words in the imperial palace had hurt her deeply, but whenever he treated her well, she couldn't help but approach him. That's right. Back then, she should have fended for herself and not become a burden to anyone else. Otherwise, there wouldn't be such a situation today. She wiped her tears and ran out of the study. Her reaction was completely out of his expectations. By the time he reacted, she was already at the door. His body subconsciously wanted to chase after her, but he suddenly caught a glimpse of the tears in the corner of her eyes. He suddenly froze and then immediately chased after her. But when he reached the door, Lin Jiangdong appeared in front of him. "Lord, things are not good," Lin Jiangdong said in a grave tone. With this interruption, she had already run far away. It was too late for him to chase after her. Even if he caught up, he didn't know what to say. In the end, he could only watch her leave the courtyard and disappear. He withdrew his gaze and suppressed the chaotic emotions in his heart. He looked at Lin Jiangdong, "Come in and talk." The two of them returned to the study. Lin Jiangdong said eagerly, "Your Highness, the Emperor has heard about your visit to the King of England's estate 2 days ago. Now, he's ordered people to investigate your relationship with Xiao Su. He seems to be worried about you working together." Xiao Ho fell silent with that. Afterwards, he sneered softly, "This old fox is still so sensitive. As long as he comes across anything related to Xiao Su, he'll dig deep into the ground to investigate it. Lin Jiangdong said worriedly, it's exactly because of that I'm worried that he'll discover our secrets during the investigation. Although we've always done a very good job of keeping secrets, we can't be too careful. Although the discovery of the incident in Qingyang was an accident, didn't it also prove this point? The strategist's analysis was not without reason. Then do you have any ideas, sir? Xiao Ho raised his head and looked at him. After some thought, Lin Jiangdong said, the crux of this matter lies in your relationship with Xiao Su. His Majesty suspects that the two of you are conspiring together. All those in power are like that, afraid that their subordinates will collude with each other. As a result, as long as you cut ties with Xiao Su, His Majesty's suspicions can be erased, and we can safely avoid this matter. After hearing that, Xiao Ho leaned back in his chair with a rather sunken face. He tapped the table gently with his fingers as if he was thinking about something. His father's fear of Xiao Su increased with each passing day. He could not drag him into this, or he would be completely wiped out when the time came. All right. Send someone to send a message to Prince Pang. Tell him that I have something important to discuss with him, so I want to see him right now. Xiao Ho made a prompt decision and ordered. When Lin Jiangdong saw this, he knew that Lord already had a plan in mind. He couldn't help but feel happy. As expected, he did not follow the wrong person. Xiao Ho was a person with great talent and could take on great responsibilities. Lin Jiangdong received the order and was about to leave when Xiao Ho suddenly called out to him. Later, send someone to investigate where the princess went today. You must ensure her safety. Although he was disappointed that she still could not forget Yu Qingxi and felt an inexplicable anger, when he thought of the tears at the corners of her eyes just now, he couldn't help but subconsciously give this order. Lin Jiangdong was slightly surprised. This disaster that had come out of nowhere was all because of Pang Zhijing. If it weren't for her poison, Lord would not have gone to visit Xiao Su. He would also not have entered the Sichuan Emperor's line of sight and aroused his suspicions. She didn't think that Lord would still be concerned about her at this moment. Lin Jiangdong thought for a bit, then said, Lord, although this one knows that some words should not be said, since they are your private matters, this one feels that if your private matters have already involved official matters, then it is still necessary to remind you. Xiao Ho didn't know what he wanted to say, so he calmly looked at him. The princess's temperament and appearance are indeed something that few girls in the capital can compare to, but it's not like there aren't any girls like her. This one wants to advise Lord not to indulge too deeply. Otherwise, you won't be able to pull yourself away in the future and it will affect the grand plan. This one has said enough. Your Highness should think about it carefully. Xiao Ho froze on the spot. Even after Lin Jiangdong left, he still didn't change his posture. Was that so? He had already indulged too deeply. That shouldn't be the case. Yes, he just felt that she was very amusing and interesting. That was all. He wouldn't indulge, and it definitely wouldn't affect the grand plan. He said this to himself in his heart. Chapter 1260. After Pang Zhijing left Prince Yi's estate, she got into the carriage and cried all the way back to the relay station. Lu didn't dare to ask her what happened. She could only comfort her quietly, but it was of no use. When she reached her room, Pang Zhijing lay on the table and continued to cry. She was heartbroken. Princess, don't be sad. Your eyes will be uncomfortable if you cry for too long. Lu patted her back gently, afraid that she would choke. Pang Zhijing cried even harder. Lu you don't understand. My heart hurts so much. Princess, don't cry. Lu wants to cry with you. Lu sobbed with reddened eyes. Pang Zhijing's tears kept flowing. She said in an incomparably sorrowful voice, Lu, you said he was fierce to me. He treated me so badly. Why do I still like him so much? Are you talking about Lord Yi? Lu asked with widened eyes. Who else could it be? That scum Yu Qingxi is nothing. I must be crazy if I shed half a tear for him. She snorted. Lu quickly comforted her furious master. Then why don't you explain it to Lord and let him know your feelings? I think Lord cares about you too. Cares? She laughed bitterly. Her throat was filled with bitterness. No, he doesn't have feelings in his life now. He only sees hatred in his eyes. His heart is sealed. I can't open the door in his heart. I was rejected by him from the start. If I explain it to him, I'll just be asking for humiliation. He already said it so bluntly back then. Why did she have to ask for a snub? If a guy really liked a girl, he wouldn't wait for her to make the first move. He would think of ways to let her know his feelings. She felt that in Xiaoho's life, there was no such thing as making the first move. You'll never see hope when you're with someone like him. When she thought of this, she slowly straightened up. She wiped her tears and thought absent-mindedly. She had already decided to leave. Why did she care so much about his attitude towards her? Back then, she had told herself that in the remaining time, she should properly bid farewell to her first crush without leaving any regrets. But the closer she got to him, the more she couldn't help but be drawn in. His heart wanted to pull away, but the more he indulged, the more reluctant he was to do so. She couldn't help but smile bitterly. Back then, she had spoken so confidently to Qin Yan. If this place didn't want her, there would be a place for her. If this person didn't love her, there would be someone who loved her. But now, he realized that liking someone might only take a second or a glance, but forgetting someone would take a long time, or even a lifetime. It was easy to lose one's heart, but difficult to forget. She suddenly smiled, but her eyes were filled with sorrow. Lu who was at the side, saw her princess cry and then laugh. She could not help but worry. Princess, are you all right? Pang Zhijing shook her head and looked at Lu She took her hand and said earnestly, Lu if you meet a man in the future, before he falls in love with you, don't give your heart away. Love is actually like war. Whoever falls in love first will be the first to suffer a crushing defeat. This was the deepest realization of blood and tears that she had gained from this battle of unrequited love. Lu had never come into contact with these things, so she didn't quite understand. But she could hear the pain and sorrow in her princess's voice, and she couldn't help but feel sorry for her. Princess, if you're still in pain, just cry it out. It'll hurt you if you keep it in. Pang Zhijing, who was still immersed in sorrow, couldn't help but smile. Under Lu Er's puzzled gaze, she shook her head and wiped her tears. Lu you were the one who told me not to cry. Now, you're the one who's telling me to cry a little longer. Why do you change your mind so easily? Lu looked wronged. This servant saw that you were still in pain. Do you feel better now? Pang Zhijing sniffled. Although the sadness in her eyes was still there, her mood was much better than before. Cry a little and vent your feelings. That's about it. One can't always be immersed in the worry of personal gains and losses. Otherwise, you won't be able to see the beautiful scenery around you. Don't worry, time heals many things. It might leave a scar, but it won't hurt anymore. She should stop when it came to Xiaoho. Parting would come one day. She had to be prepared to leave at any time. Otherwise, she was afraid that when that day came, she would be caught off guard and unable to remain calm. She would be in an extremely sorry state. Lu was still young and didn't understand these things. But she realized that the princess now didn't have her usual playful and mischievous appearance. She was so mature and sensible that she felt a little unfamiliar. She felt that sometimes, the princess wasn't as ignorant of worldly affairs as she appeared to be. Perhaps she knew much more than others in her heart. It was just that the princess who occasionally revealed her true self made her feel sorry for her. Lu don't look at me like that. Otherwise, I'll think that I don't have long to live. Alright, help me send someone to the King of England's residence to tell Qin Yan that I'll go find her another time. At this moment, she didn't have the mood to see Qin Yan anymore. Her eyes were so red and swollen. If she went, she would definitely worry. Lu nodded and went to give the order. At this moment, Xiao Ho walked into the courtyard where Pang Huang lived. What brings you here? Pang Huang had just finished practicing his sword. His face was covered in sweat and he was wiping his sword with a cloth in his hand. When he saw Xiao Ho walking slowly towards him, he couldn't help but raise his eyebrows and ask. As the saying goes, one doesn't visit a temple without a reason. I don't dare to disturb the crown prince's time. Today, I have something important to discuss with you. Xiao Ho stood in front of him and smiled. Pang Huang smiled and praised, I like your personality. Simple and direct. You don't lose the forthrightness of us grassland men. Your Highness, you flatter me. Pang Huang put away his sword and handed it to his subordinate. He extended his hand and said, all right, let's talk in the study. This way, please. This way, Your Highness. At the same time, Yu Qingxi also received the news in the temporary imperial residence where the Nansang bridal party was staying. My lord, the princess went to Prince Yi's residence today. She stayed for a while and left quickly. Her mood was different from before. When she left, she seemed to be crying and looked very sad. According to my understanding, she seemed to have quarreled with Prince Yi, the subordinate in charge of monitoring, Pang Zhijing reported. Yu Qingxi laughed mockingly. I knew it. With her unruly and willful personality, no one can stand her. It's only a matter of time before Xiao Ho gets tired of her. Then what should we do next? The subordinate asked. Yu Qingxi pondered for a moment and suddenly laughed sinisterly. Back then, she schemed against Ro. This time, we'll give her a taste of her own medicine. Chapter 1261. When Chu Qingyan received the news from the relay station, she was a little surprised. She wondered if something had happened. She wanted to send someone to inquire about it, but she was afraid that she would attract attention at such a critical juncture, so she could only suppress her thoughts. At this moment, Qingyan Luo, who was also in the room, asked doubtfully, Is this the friend you wanted me to treat? Chu Qingyan smiled and nodded. That's right. She is a new friend that I made during this period of time. Although she is the princess of the southern blue continent, her personality is not bad. Her thoughts and values are very similar to mine. I believe that when you meet her, you will also like her. Qingyan Luo nodded and sighed, it's rare to see you so sure about someone. If there's a chance, I must see what kind of superhuman abilities this princess has to make you recommend her so much. Hua Xiu, who was nibbling on a melon, looked up and said, although she doesn't have superhuman abilities, she's more unusual than that. I've heard some of her opinions. She's indeed a very unique girl. Qingyan Luo rubbed her chin, interest in her eyes, then I must see her even more. Chu Qingyan chuckled, you'll definitely have a chance. At this moment, Qingyan Luo turned to Hua Xiu, who had been burying her head in eating. She crossed her arms and raised her eyebrows, speaking of which, you've been freeloading here for the past 2 days. When are you going to stop? You've been strolling in front of me every day. Can't you find a place to stay and not stroll around under my nose? Hua Xiu finished the last piece of watermelon and leisurely wiped her mouth and fingers before looking at her. In any case, I'll disappear from your sight when you agree to help me with the continuation of my business. I won't disturb you and your ethereal lovey-dovey. Qingyan Luo felt a headache coming on. She had been everywhere for the past 2 days. If she was not eating at her and Murong's table, she would be watching her and Murong from the side. Moreover, she always looked at her with a sad expression, which made her feel uncomfortable. Even Murong had been asking her what was going on between her and Xiuli these past 2 days. She simply had enough. What if I don't agree? Hua Xiu shrugged, then I'll continue to disturb you. Okay. She raised her hands in surrender. I promise you. I'll agree to anything you say. Is that okay? Hua Xiu immediately jumped over and pulled her away. That's what you said. Come with me to the shop now. Cheng Yanluo turned around to look at Chu Qingyan with a pitiful and helpless expression on her face. Murong was her lifeline now. Who asked her to have her lifeline in her sleeve? She was too cunning. Indeed, all businessmen were cunning. Chu Qingyan watched as the two of them left. She shook her head and laughed. Because she wanted to open a branch, she was very short on manpower. Although Jin Ling was already here, he was still on his way. It would probably take half a month for him to meet up with Xiao Li. So before that, she had to find someone to share the burden. Due to the fact that she had to manage all the affairs of the prince's mansion, she had been swamped with work. Hence, she hadn't had the nerve to ask her to come along. Now that Yan Luo had returned, she was the happiest person in the world. Hence, she had been thinking of ways to encourage Yan Luo to help. "What are you laughing at?" A voice rang beside her ear. She turned around to look at the person and smiled. "Why are you back so early? I thought you would only be done in the evening." Xiao Su walked up to her and smiled. "I'm not made of iron. I have to slack off when I have to." Her eyes lit up. "Big Ice Cube, you're finally enlightened." Xiao Su looked at her helplessly. "This is all thanks to you. You've been nagging me all day." She laughed mischievously, then stood up and pushed him to sit on the chair. She tilted her head and said, "Have a seat. It's been hard on you. Come, I'll let you enjoy a free massage from me." As she spoke, she went around to his back and began to massage and knead him like a professional. Because she had a good grasp of his acupuncture points, she knew which areas could relieve fatigue. Hence, every stroke was precise. Xiao Su felt that the exhaustion from the past 2 days was slowly being soothed as he felt the right amount of strength. "Big Ice Cube, have things been going well recently?" she asked. Previously, when the Nansang envoy group had arrived, they had been tormenting them and making all sorts of demands. Later on, the subordinates couldn't take it anymore and reported to Big Ice Cube. Big Ice Cube had personally taken action, so those people didn't dare to make a sound anymore. This time, she was also worried. Xiao Su said calmly, "This time, the bridal escort group was very well behaved. However, it made me even more worried." She was surprised. "What do you mean?" "This time, the person in charge of the bridal escort group is called Yu Qingxi. He's the only son of Nansang Prime Minister and has already entered the imperial court as an official. The officials under him never came out after entering the imperial residence. I've never seen them before. However, I've seen that Yu Qingxi a few times. It's hard to judge his character, but he's overly modest." Xiao Su recalled the first time he met Yu Qingxi. He was different from the boorish Nansang men. Instead, he had a scholarly air and was very polite when he spoke and did things. However, strictly speaking, he was a little perfunctory. A few officials from the Ministry of Rights who were in charge of the marriage had told him that after these people arrived, they didn't seem to care much about their princess's marriage. As long as it was decided by the Ministry of Rights, they didn't have any objections. Xiao Su couldn't help but suspect their purpose in coming here. After listening to Big Ice Cube's description, she couldn't help but feel suspicious. Could it be that Nansang sent people who only know how to eat and not do anything? She raised a possibility. That's not impossible, but, Xiao Su suddenly frowned. I suspect that Pang Huang is also here. Chu Qingyan's fingers paused. She walked over to sit in front of him with some astonishment. Is that true? He suffered such a heavy injury back then. Logically speaking, he shouldn't have recovered so quickly. Moreover, he came here without any notice. It's very easy for someone to take revenge on him. Because the two countries were at war, many of the capital's nobles held high positions in the army. They weren't like those hedonistic sons of rich parents who muddled along in the capital's barracks. They worked hard to get to their positions. Later, when the 3 armies returned, they were buried in a hero's grave. This caused many of the capital's great families to hate Pang Huang to the bone. If he appeared without any notice, it would be very easy for him to be killed. This is also the reason why I didn't dare to make a judgment. It's just that in the past few days, I've seen a few unfamiliar faces appear in the city. These people weren't part of the bridal party, so I sent people to secretly investigate. However, I was afraid of being discovered, so I didn't follow too closely. However, these people's actions are very similar to Pang Huang's style of doing things. Moreover, there are a few familiar faces, which made me suspicious. Xiao Su narrowed his eyes. His expression sank. Chu Qingyan was a bit uneasy. If it was really as Big Ice Cube said, then if Nansang was plotting something, then wouldn't Xishuan be in danger again? Would she and Big Ice Cube be unable to leave again? Chapter 1262. At this moment, Xiao Ho and Pang Huang were sitting opposite each other. The steam from the tea in front of them was rising in spirals, obscuring their vision. Pang Huang leaned against the back of the chair with his arms crossed. He restrained his arrogance and said leisurely, "Prince Yi, why are you in such a hurry?" Xiao Ho took a sip of the tea to moisten his throat. Then he slowly said, "These 2 days, my men were discovered by my father. Now he's sending people to investigate. Although they haven't found anything, I'm still worried. What's more, a few days ago, I went to the King of England's mansion for some business, which aroused my father's suspicion. He thinks that I'm involved with Xiao Su. If these 2 things happened in normal times, I wouldn't be so worried. But when these 2 things happen together, I'm really afraid that something will be found out." Pang Huang nodded, the corners of his mouth curling up into a smile. "Usually, this kind of thing will affect the whole situation. You've been holding back for so many years just for this 1 year. If you're discovered, wouldn't all your efforts be wasted?" "Yes, this is exactly what I'm worried about." Xiao Ho played with the teacup in his hand with a calm expression. "How can the connections and forces I've painstakingly built for so many years be destroyed because of a small mistake?" Pang Huang raised his eyebrows slightly. "Although you say so, how can I not see Prince Yi's anxiety? Could it be that you already have a countermeasure?" Xiao Ho chuckled and met Pang Huang's inquisitive eyes. He said in a clear voice, "Of course. If I didn't have a countermeasure, how could I dare to disturb your highness?" Pang Huang saw Xiao Ho relaxed and couldn't help but mutter in his heart. This was definitely not a small matter. However, Xiao Ho in front of him was not nervous at all. On the contrary, he acted as if nothing had happened. This made him a little afraid of Xiao Xian, the lord who had no sense of existence. If this person was a friend, it would be fine. But if he became an opponent, it would be very troublesome. He might not be inferior to Xiao Su. But it was also because of this that he was looking forward to the scene between Xiao Su and Xiao Ho. Once these 2 people who were on par with each other fought, it would probably be more exciting than any other scene. "Please enlighten me, Prince Yi. I'm all ears." Xiao Ho nodded, then the corners of his lips lifted slightly as he slowly said, "Imperial Father is investigating the relationship between me and Xiao Su. He suspects that the 2 of us are colluding together. This is what he is most worried about. As long as we put on a show for him and prove that I have no relationship with Xiao Su, and that we will not obstruct his idea of letting Xiao Ren inherit the throne, then my crisis will be resolved. Furthermore, this show has to attract a lot of attention. I'll take the opportunity to divert Imperial Father's attention from the fact that my weapons have been exposed. Then, I'll take the opportunity to fish in troubled waters and get rid of that lone craftsman to prevent future trouble. Then, I'll take the opportunity to frame Xiao Su for these weapons so that he won't be able to defend himself." After listening to Xiao Ho's words, Pang Huang could not help but have a strong interest. He leaned forward slightly and asked curiously, "You have said so much, but you still haven't revealed the secret. How do you want me to help you put on this show?" Xiao Ho curled his lips into a smile as a light flashed in his eyes. "It's very simple. I want to arrange an assassination. The target of the assassination is myself, and the assassin is the fierce cavalry." "Fierce cavalry? Isn't that Xiao Su's elite cavalry?" "Don't tell me you want," Pang Huang's eyes lit up, "you want people to impersonate them?" Xiao Ho nodded, that's right. After so many years, my people have fought with Xiao Su's fierce cavalry countless times. They have a good understanding of them, so we can start from there. Saying this, Xiao Ho looked up at Pang Huang. However, although they have a good understanding of the fierce cavalry, I am currently at the heart of the struggle. Sending out my own people is too risky, and it will easily be exposed. Therefore, I want to borrow some people from your highness to impersonate the fierce cavalry. My people will be responsible for teaching them some habits and moves. What does your highness think? We are allies. Your business is my business. What's there to say? How many people do you need? Just tell me and I will arrange it for you. Pang Huang agreed without hesitation. Xiao Ho smiled and cupped his hands. Thank you, your highness. Prince Yi, you are too polite. Pang Huang raised his hand to block. Then he seemed to think of something and raised his eyebrows at the smiling fox in front of him. Didn't you say that Xiao Su planned to leave the capital? Now that you have done this to him, he can't leave even if he wants to. Moreover, he has already handed over the commander's seal. Now he has no bargaining chips in his hands. He doesn't even have the ability to challenge your father. You are basically pushing him into a fire pit. Xiao Ho chuckled and said in a disapproving tone, isn't this the result we want? 5 years ago, I was able to frame him for the assassination of Xiao Ran and made my father transfer him far away. He almost died on the road. This time, I can still use the same trick and frame him so that he can't defend himself. Now the support for the crown prince is getting louder and louder. The party that supports Xiao Su and the party that supports Xiao Ran are on equal footing. However, the people are more inclined to support Xiao Su. However, Xiao Su isn't a candidate in my father's heart and he is in a terrible fix. Xiao Su took the initiative to leave. Although this solved my father's urgent problem, no matter where Xiao Su goes, he will always be a thorn in my father's throat. Now I am just providing him with a reason to get rid of Xiao Su. In this way, I am still a very filial son who took the initiative to share his worries. Pang Huang laughed loudly, filial. Ha, I have to say that your idea is really bad. Not only did you clear yourself of suspicion, but you also transferred the trouble to Xiao Su. You even framed him for murdering his own brother and gave your father a reason to get rid of him. Prince Yi, I must never become your opponent. Otherwise, I won't even know how I died. Your Highness, you're exaggerating. I'm just returning the favor to them for what they did to my grandfather's family back then. Isn't there a saying in Buddhism, if you plant the seeds, you'll have to taste the fruits of your actions? Xiao Ho revealed a cold smile. Although he didn't know what happened at Xiao Ho's mother's house, he could tell from Xiao Ho's words that it involved some secret in the palace. However, he had seen this kind of thing many times in the southern song. Pang Huang asked, since you hate Xiao Su so much, don't you think this ending is too easy for him? Xiao Ho laughed softly and turned to look at Pang Huang. His eyes revealed an unfathomable smile, which was somewhat terrifying. I don't hate Xiao Su. However, I want to achieve my goal through Xiao Su. I want to let those who stand behind him have a taste of what it means to fall short of success and despair. I want to return the suffering my mother went through back then, bit by bit. The expression in his eyes startled Pang Huang. It turned out that this gentle lord hid such a ruthless heart. Even someone like him, who had been immersed in the whirlpool of power for many years, felt a trace of fear. Chapter 1263. Seeing that Pang Huang had no objections to his plan, Xiao Ho leisurely brewed tea for himself. The person in front of him was elegant and calm. It was impossible to tell that he was the person who had just said that it was killing 3 birds with 1 stone. Some people hid their true face under a mask, as if they didn't exist. But when such a person didn't plan to hide himself, the counterattack was the most terrifying. Pang Huang retracted his gaze and asked, since the plan has been set, when do we prepare to move? Xiao Ho poured the tea smoothly. When the teacups were full, he put down the teapot. He lowered his eyebrows and thought for a moment. According to the usual practice, every month I have to go to Hugua Temple to worship Buddha, cultivate my body and mind, and eat vegetarian meals. This is something that the entire capital knows. Imperial Father and Xiao Su are no exception. And the time is in 3 days, so let's set it on that day. Saying this, he handed the brewed tea to Pang Huang. Okay, then 3 days later, send someone over to teach my people how to act as the fierce cavalry. This will add double insurance to our operation. Saying this, Pang Huang took the tea he handed over and put it under his nose to sniff. A smile bloomed on his lips. I didn't know that you had this trick up your sleeve. I just have nothing to do to pass the time. Xiao Ho took a sip of tea and relaxed his brows. The person you want, I've already brought it over. Today, we can start teaching. Pang Huang's fingers paused and he looked at him suspiciously. So you've already done everything. Aren't you afraid that I won't agree? Xiao Ho raised the corner of his mouth, revealing an elegant and unrestrained smile. He said in a certain tone, you won't. Why? Pang Huang was surprised. He was so sure. Xiao Ho stood up and looked down at him from above, because we have a common enemy. This is what I'm relying on. With that, he put down the teacup in his hand and looked at Pang Huang, who still hadn't come back to his senses. He smiled and said, thank you, Crown Prince, for the good tea. This prince will leave first. Next time, I'll come back for another cup. Goodbye. After he finished speaking, he turned around and slowly walked away with his hands behind his back. His figure was elegant and tall, and his azure clothes fluttered in the wind, giving others the illusion that he was gentle and harmless. However, only Pang Huang knew that this person was not as gentle and harmless as he appeared on the surface. He had the sharpness to see through people's hearts, the courage to cut off all means of retreat, the cunning and ruthless methods, and the forbearance that ordinary people did not have. At the same time, in the palace, there was another person who was scheming. Then, young master, how do you plan to give him a taste of his own medicine? The subordinate asked. Yu Qingxi tapped the folding fan in her hand and laughed mockingly. Isn't Pang Zhijing's fiancé, Prince Yi, weak and sickly? This is enough for us to make use of. As she spoke, Yu Qingxi recalled the tacit understanding and intimacy between Pang Zhijing and Xiao Ho on the street that day. A nameless fire ignited in his heart. It was as if he saw the person who used to follow him suddenly stop following him and turn to identify him. He felt uncomfortable as if what originally belonged to him had become someone else's. Although he didn't like Pang Zhijing and even loathed her, as a princess, Pang Zhijing boldly and passionately pursued him. Although it made him very annoyed, it also gave him a sense of satisfaction and inflated his vanity. At this time, the person who only had eyes for him didn't care about him anymore. This strong sense of contrast made him angry. He would never allow anyone to spy on his things. This was the deep-rooted bad habit of a heartless man. To put it crudely, he was occupying the latrine but not taking a shit. Therefore, Yu Qingxi continued. Back then, Pang Zhijing drugged Ro, and almost made her lose her chastity. Now, we will use the same method. Then you plan to use it on the princess? The subordinate inquired. No, Yu Qingxi denied. A trace of cunning appeared on his face. The person we want to drug is Xiao Ho. Ah. I don't understand. The young master clearly wanted to teach the princess a lesson. Why did he target Prince Yi? Yu Qingxi sneered. Xiao Ho's body is weak. As long as he touches a little bit of the drug and can't find a woman to detoxify him, he will bleed to death from his 7 orifices. If he finds a woman to detoxify him, his weak body won't be able to withstand it. It won't be long before he dies on the bed. No matter how he dies, he will leave behind a ridiculing infamy. Even if he dies under a flower, he will still be a romantic ghost. This can only be regarded as an accident at most. No one can find out that we did it. However, the wedding is imminent and the groom dies in such a way. How sad, how embarrassed, and how sad our princess will be if she dies in such a way. For the sake of the friendship between the two countries, the Sichuan emperor will definitely arrange another marriage for her. But as long as there is one, I will solve it. At that time, the princess will be infamy for being a jinx to her husband. Let's see if anyone dares to marry her in the future. Yu Qingxi laughed heartily. Yes, yes, yes. Young master, your method will tarnish the reputation of Prince Yi and the princess without using a single soldier. One of them indulges in excessive indulgence and the other is a jinx to her husband. This plan is simply brilliant. The subordinate gave a thumbs up repeatedly. However, after the flattery, the subordinate asked in confusion, but will this affect the marriage alliance between the two countries? Yu Qingxi withdrew his smile and waved his hand. He said carelessly, Father didn't agree with the marriage alliance between the two countries. Although we lost the war and suffered heavy losses, we can still make a comeback after a few years of recuperation. However, the marriage alliance can temporarily delay the time and numb the Sichuan kingdom. When they think that they have subdued us, we can lead the army and attack again. We can also take the Sichuan kingdom into our pocket. The subordinate nodded. Then when do we take action? Since there is no time like the present, let's set it for 2 days later. Yu Qingxi opened his folding fan and fanned himself proudly. He really wanted to see Pang Zhijing's expression when she found out that her sickly and weak fiancé had died in another woman's bed. It really made him nervous and looked forward to it. At this moment, he suddenly remembered something. He couldn't help but turn his head and ask, by the way, you just said that the princess went to Prince Yi's mansion today and returned to the courier station with a bad complexion? The subordinate nodded. I was afraid that the other party would find out, so I didn't dare to send anyone to get close to inquire. Yu Qingxi muttered to himself for a while, and a light flashed through his eyes. He then closed his fan and stood up. He said with a smile, as a member of the bridal party, I didn't even go to the courier station to see the princess. I was afraid that I would be criticized, so I'd better go and show my face. Moreover, the princess is in a bad mood. As a subject, I have the responsibility to help share her burden. Therefore, this trip seems unavoidable. After he finished speaking, Yu Qingxi strode out of the door. Chapter 1264. The King of England's Palace. The wood spirit was focused on grinding the key in his hand in the yard that he specialized in researching things. There was a box on the table and there were already 6 different shaped keys in the grooves. There was only one groove left that was empty. He was using the hammer to hammer it while comparing it to the blueprint. He carefully forged it and after forging it for a while, he went to the whetstone to grind it. The weather was very hot and sweat kept dripping down from his forehead, but he did not care about it at all. He kept paying attention to the engravings because the keyhole of this 7 apertures exquisite lock was very special. There were already over 100 failed keys at his feet and this one was one of the countless, but he had to treat it seriously. Perhaps this one would succeed. The closer it was to the final crucial moment, the more careful he became. When the last carving was completed, he put the key into the water. After it cooled down, he took it out again and looked at it in the light from the window. The 12 carvings on the key appeared perfectly on the surface of the key. The depth of each carving was different. He was a little excited and immediately put the key on the drawing to compare. It was exactly the same as the one on the drawing. He immediately jumped up, success, I succeeded. He finally completed the 7 keys to open the 7 apertures exquisite lock. Once again, he had achieved a breakthrough. At this time, the wood spirit did not care about his body. He placed the last key in the groove and then quickly walked to the main yard with the box. The earth spirit and the fire spirit were discussing matters as they walked towards the main courtyard. When they looked up, they saw the wood spirit in a hurry. Just as they were about to call out to him, they saw that he didn't care about them at all and quickly disappeared from their sight. What happened to the wood spirit? Huo Ling blinked and was a bit confused. Turin replied, I think I saw him holding a box. Box? The two of them looked at each other. It wouldn't be that key, right? So the two of them sped up and entered the door. They saw the wood spirit open the box and excitedly say to his master and the little princess, "This subordinate has already finished researching these 7 keys." Chu Qingyan happily stood up and walked towards the wood spirit. Her fingers touched the different shaped keys and her face was filled with surprise. "Wood spirit, you're too awesome. You're really too amazing." Turan and Hualing came in and gave him a punch each. "You brat, not bad. You're too capable." The wood spirit was embarrassed by the praise and laughed foolishly. At this time, Chu Qingyan smiled and turned to Xiao Su. "Since the keys have been completed, can we arrange for Zijing's departure?" Xiao Su heard this and looked at Turan. The earth spirit received his master's signal and immediately bowed slightly to the young princess. "The follow-up has been arranged. Now, as long as we confirm the departure time, our people can go and pick up Princess Pang at any time." Chu Qingyan nodded with satisfaction. Turan had always been thorough and reliable, so there was nothing to worry about. So she asked Xiao Su, "Then when do you think is a good time?" Xiao Su pondered for a while, then said, "It's best if Pang Zijing avoids third brother when she leaves. He's smart and sharp, so it's hard to guarantee that he'll notice something. 3 days from now is the time he'll go to Hugua Temple. Let's set it on that day to avoid any accidents." Chu Qingyan nodded in agreement. "Okay, this subordinate and Hualing will arrange for people." Turan immediately left with Hualing. The wood spirit felt that his mission had been completed. If he stayed any longer, he would become a big lantern for his 2 masters. Remembering that he still hadn't made a puppet for First Master Chu, the wood spirit immediately left. Chu Qingyan was overjoyed. She turned to Jasper and said, "Go to the relay station and tell Zijing to prepare. Don't let anyone else hear." Jasper accepted the order and left. At this time, only the 2 of them were left in the room. She walked in front of Xiao Su and reached out to hug his arm. Her happy mood unknowingly faded. "Big Ice Cube, we'll have to send Zijing away in 3 days. I'm a bit sad. When the song ends, people will disperse. This is something that has to happen. But you don't have to be too sad. After we leave and this matter settles down, you can still meet again." Knowing that she liked the princess very much, Xiao Su couldn't help but comfort her. She raised her head and met his gentle gaze. Her heart was still a bit sad. "Big Ice Cube, life is like a car. In the process of moving, there are people getting off and people getting on. We're always meeting and separating. In the end, there are only a few people left by your side. Those who travel with you will be with you until the end." He raised his hand to touch her head, a doting look appearing in his eyes. "And I will always be with you." She couldn't help but reach out to hug him. "Big Ice Cube, me too. Unless we're separated by death, we'll never part alive." Xiao Su reached out to hug her back and held her tightly in his arms. "Unless we're separated by death, we'll never part alive? Even if we're separated by death, we'll still be together. In 3 days, General Li will arrive in the capital. We can leave by then." "Okay." She couldn't help but smile at the thought of being able to leave this place far away. At the courier station, Peng Zijing was sitting under a tree in the courtyard, lying on the stone table and flipping through a book in boredom. Lu hurried over. Princess, Princess," Peng Zijing didn't even lift her eyelids and looked indifferent. "What happened? Why are you in such a hurry?" Lu ran in front of her and said breathlessly, "Master Yu is here. He's now in the hall talking to Lord Tori." "Oh." Peng Zijing replied perfunctorily. Lu was stunned. "Princess, is this your reaction?" Peng Zijing couldn't stand her fussing anymore. She looked up and rolled her eyes at her. "Then what reaction do you want me to have? This courier station isn't our home. He's here with the identity of the bridal party. How can we chase him out? So don't make a fuss. There's a new fruit here. Do you want to try it?" Lu shook her head vigorously. "Princess, this servant means that Master Yu will come to the courtyard to see you later." Peng Zijing's hand paused in the middle of flipping through the book. She said in disbelief, "What did you just say?" Lu immediately repeated herself and said, "Princess, do you want to hide for a while?" Lu had heard from the princess that this young Master Yu was a two-faced and calculative person. Previously, the princess had offended him in the southern Blue Continent. This time, he wouldn't let the princess off so easily. Lu couldn't help but worry. At this moment, Pang Zhijing closed the book and looked past Lu at the arched door not far away. Her gaze was distant as she said, "It's too late." What? Lu didn't understand. Seeing that the princess kept looking behind her, she couldn't help but follow her gaze. A figure appeared at the arched door and looked around. When he saw the two of them, he strode over while waving a paper fan. Enemies are bound to meet on a narrow road. Pang Zhijing cursed softly in her heart. Chapter 1265. After leaving Pang Huang's courtyard, Xiaohou boarded the carriage and slowly headed back to his prince's estate. He closed his eyes and went through the plan for 3 days later. After making sure that he didn't miss anything, he slowly opened his eyes. Suddenly, he caught a glimpse of something on the couch in the carriage. He leaned over and picked it up. It was a pink handkerchief with a faint fragrance. The style was very familiar. Wasn't this the thing that little rascal usually kept by her side? It should have been left on his carriage a few days ago. At this time, the handkerchief reminded him of what had happened in the study today. Because of those insignificant women, she had suddenly run away without saying a word to him. He originally wanted to chase after her and properly correct her bad habit of running away at the slightest provocation. However, Mr. Lin's appearance interrupted him and told him some unexpected things, so he didn't have time to care about her. Now that he thought about it, the words he said at that time seemed too stiff and misunderstood her meaning. In addition, he didn't deliberately explain, so she should have been jealous at that time, right? Jealous? When this word flashed through his mind, a smile involuntarily appeared in his eyes. Where is the princess right now? Ever since the princess returned to the relay station, she hasn't left her room. Okay, let's go to the relay station. The carriage immediately turned around and headed towards the relay station. Since he hurt her heart today, then he would go and explain. If she wanted to know the origins of those women and what they did, then he would tell her. Xiaohou had never been someone who liked to explain his actions. However, ever since he met Pang Zhijing, he would subconsciously explain to her. Perhaps, this was a way of expressing that he cared. If you didn't care about someone, then you wouldn't care about what they thought and wouldn't take their feelings into consideration. However, Xiaohou didn't realize that his feelings for Pang Zhijing were gradually deepening. The carriage was currently heading towards the relay station. However, at this time, in the relay station, Pang Zhijing looked at the uninvited guest in front of her and couldn't help but narrow her eyes. She saw Yu Qingxi strolling in front of her and waving her folding fan. Her sleeves fluttered in the wind. She thought that she was the most charming and unrestrained like this. If it was in the past, Pang Zhijing would definitely turn into a loyal dog and pounce over to curry favor with him. However, he was wrong this time. Pang Zhi sat quietly under the tree. Not only was she unmoved, she even retracted her gaze and picked up a book to read seriously. Yu Qingxi frowned slightly. Why did it fail? He was slightly annoyed. He did not believe that his charm had diminished. Your Highness, I've just arrived at Sichuan 2 days ago, and I'm not used to it yet, so I didn't come over to disturb you. Today, I thought that Your Highness might not be used to this place, so I came to ask for Your Highness' forgiveness, as well as to greet Your Highness. A concerned smile appeared on Yu Qingxi's feminine face. Moreover, she knew how to use her pair of beautiful eyes to look at Pang Zhijing with a self-reproach and apologetic light. If the Pang Zhijing of the past saw Yu Qingxi like this, she would probably have long been overjoyed and giddy with happiness. It was a pity that the person standing in front of him was no longer the infatuated princess who was dead set on him. Pang Zhijing only felt that this person's eyes were twitching so badly. Could it be that he had contracted some kind of red-eye disease? She hurriedly averted her eyes, not wanting to be infected by him. However, this made Yu Qingxi think that she did not dare to look at him because she was shy, and he couldn't help but feel pleased. It seemed that she really was playing hard to get with him previously. Since official Yu has asked for forgiveness and asked for greetings, you can leave now. She planned to ignore him. Otherwise, this person would be like a grasshopper, jumping higher and higher. However, Yu Qingxi walked forward a few steps, and he could see her when he lowered his head. Why is your highness treating me like an outsider? Aren't you going to invite me to drink a cup of tea? I remember that your highness specially learned the art of tea for Qingxi in the past. Now that I'm here, can I ask for a cup of tea that your highness personally brewed? Yu Qingxi's eyes were so sincere that they seemed to carry deep affection, as if he was looking at his sweetheart. Pang Zhijing raised her head and looked into his eyes, but she was not bewitched by the affection in his eyes. Instead, she felt disgusted. This princess's skills are not good, so I won't embarrass myself in front of official Yu. Moreover, I heard that Miss Ro's art of tea is even better. You can go back and look for her. She leaned back, not wanting to be too close to him. This kind of distance made her feel very insecure. Yu Qingxi did not notice her small movements. In the future, she would be jealous. Her heart would be even happier, and her vanity would be even more inflated. As expected, she still had him in her heart. She was just pretending not to care. This time, Yu Qingxi's actions were even more ambiguous. He stretched out his hand to support himself on the stone table. From behind, it was as if he was holding her in his arms. And when he lowered his gaze, it happened to fall on her bright and beautiful face. His eyes trembled slightly. Why didn't he think that she was actually so beautiful in the past? Especially that pair of eyes, which were as resplendent as gemstones, so bright that they seemed to be able to speak. It's so cute to see your highness jealous. However, when did we become so distant? In the past, you used to call me older brother Qingxi. Ever since we came to the Sichuan, I've never heard you call me older brother Qingxi. Let's not call each other princesses and young masters anymore. How about we just be like before? Little sister Zhijing. Yu Qingxi's voice became gentler. He was already handsome, and hearing him like this made him even more attractive. But when Pang Zhijing heard these words, she felt a chill. She stood up and left his encirclement. She took a few steps back, and when she was at a safe distance, she raised her eyebrows and looked at him coldly. Older brother Qingxi. Sorry, I only have a younger brother in my family. I don't have an older brother, so don't call me little sister. Seeing that she had left his range, Yu Qingxi was a little unhappy and looked up at her. At this moment, he heard her say sarcastically, moreover, this princess remembers that Lord Yu's eyes were in the sky in the past. He couldn't see this princess at all. But now, his attitude has changed 180 degrees. This princess doesn't believe that you treat this princess differently because of my beauty and want to go back to the same old grass. Yu Qingxi narrowed his eyes. He didn't want to admit that he was almost tempted by her beauty just now. Seeing that he didn't answer, Pang Zhijing snorted softly. But even if you want to go back to the same old grass, this princess isn't willing to be the same old grass. Also, this princess doesn't want to see you. What about you? Scram as far as you can. Don't disturb this princess's interest in reading. Before she could finish speaking, the silent person in front of her suddenly walked towards her. Because Yu Qingxi knew martial arts, his inner strength wasn't low. When he walked towards her with such pressure, she couldn't help but retreat. In the end, she had nowhere to run and her back was pressed against the tree trunk. Yu Qingxi reached out and encircled her between the tree trunk and him. Their breaths were getting closer and closer. Princess, are you still angry with me? If I promise that I won't treat you like that in the future, Lu had just gone down to prepare tea and snacks. At this moment, there was no one in the courtyard. She wanted to open her mouth to call for someone, but she couldn't. Now that she heard him spouting nonsense, she was very annoyed and reached out to push him. What are you two doing? At this moment, a familiar and angry voice rang in her ears. Chapter 1266. When Pang Zhijing heard the voice, she immediately recognized who it was and happily turned around to look. She saw Xiao Ho standing at the entrance of the courtyard. He was dressed in a slim robe and looked like a jade orchid tree. He was extremely handsome, but the anger in his eyes stunned her. At this moment, in Xiao Ho's eyes, her hands were placed in front of Yu Qingxi's chest, looking like she was rejecting but welcoming him at the same time. Yu Qingxi was very close to her and seemed to be hugging her. Their posture was intimate and ambiguous, causing one's imagination to run wild. At this moment, a fire surged in his heart and slowly, it seemed like it was going to ignite his entire heart. When he heard Xiao Ho's voice, Yu Qingxi took advantage of the moment when Pang Zhijing wasn't paying attention and leaned closer to her. Even though he didn't touch her, from Xiao Ho's angle, it seemed like the two of them were intimately embracing each other. He had long found Xiao Ho an eyesore. What right did such a person have to snatch away his things? Even if he didn't want them, he couldn't let others take them away. Therefore, he took the opportunity to put Xiao Ho in his eyes. Pang Zhijing was initially happy, but when she saw his gloomy expression and felt a scorching pain on the back of her hand, she suddenly realized how intimate her and Yu Qingxi's actions were. Without thinking, she immediately pushed him away and took a few steps back to distance herself from Yu Qingxi. However, in Xiao Ho's eyes, this action felt like she was caught red-handed trying to cover it up. She was about to explain to Xiao Ho, but Yu Qingxi spoke before her. "Princess, I didn't cherish you in the past and only now do I feel regret after losing you. Even though I know you still have me in your heart, your marriage with Prince Yi is already set. There's no turning back. I wish you and Prince Yi a long life together. When I return to Southern Song, we won't be in contact anymore. Farewell." What the hell? Pang Zhijing still hadn't recovered from his confusing words when Yu Qingxi had already strode out of the courtyard. When he passed by Xiao Ho, he smiled at Xiao Ho, but it carried a hint of provocation and smugness. It was as if he was saying, even if you're the princess fiancé now, the person she likes is still me. When Yu Qingxi brushed past him, Xiao Ho's cold aura became even more intense. When Pang Zhijing realized that she had been tricked by Yu Qingxi, her entire body exploded with rage. She wanted to find him to settle the score, but this person knew what he had done and ran faster than a rabbit. There was already no trace of him at the entrance of the courtyard. She could only swallow this loss in secret. "Yu Qingxi, just you wait. See if I won't deal with you in the future." She gnashed her teeth and said in her heart. Then, she looked up and saw Xiao Ho turning around to leave. She didn't forget how angry he looked at her just now. She immediately went forward and grabbed his arm, wanting to explain to him. "Don't touch me." Unexpectedly, the moment she touched his hand, he flung it away. She was stunned and almost fell to the ground from the sudden force. Luckily, she held onto a tree trunk and looked at the person in front of her in disbelief. Seeing that she almost fell, a trace of annoyance flashed through Xiao Ho's eyes. But when he thought of how she and Yu Qingxi were exchanging flirtatious glances, his heart felt like it was being roasted and he was extremely angry. "Shouldn't you be looking for your lover? Why are you pulling me?" Pang Zhijing, who had yet to recover from his previous actions, was even more confused when she heard his words. "What lover? Could it be that you're talking about that scumbag Yu Qingxi? You dare to do it, but you don't dare to admit it?" He looked at her coldly. "Just now, you two were whispering sweet nothings to each other. Unfortunately, this prince saw it all. It's useless even if you want to explain it now. I'm very sorry, this prince has disturbed your two-person world. In the future, this prince will stay far away from you and won't get in your way." Hearing him revert to his distant self and say these words that made people uncomfortable, she went from being at a loss to being slightly annoyed. "Xiao Ho, can you not speak like this? It's so strange. I have nothing to do with Yu Qingxi. Don't misunderstand." "Misunderstand?" He gave a light snort, his eyes filled with disbelief. This prince believes his own eyes and also believes that he's not deaf. Everything you did and said just now, unfortunately, this prince saw and heard. do you think that this prince will believe what you're saying? At this time, Xiaohou did not notice that he was actually revealing his emotions without any concealment. Moreover, the pain that came from the depths of his heart made his anger even more vigorous. Pang Zhijing thought of how Yu Qingxi deliberately got close to her just now and realized that he did it on purpose. He deliberately wanted to cause Xiaohou to misunderstand. She opened her mouth to explain, but she heard his frosty voice. Pang Zhijing, this prince doesn't know how love-struck and foolish you are. In the past, when we were in Southern Blue, you still couldn't see Yu Qingxi's true colors. On the way to the Sichuan capital, he already sent people to kill you. Just how stubborn are you to be so dead set on him to this extent? Should this prince say that you won't give up until you reach the Yellow River, or that your brain is hopeless? Actually, what he wanted to say was, what was so good about a heartless scumbag man? To be able to make her so infatuated. I don't like him at all, and I'm not dead set on him. You misunderstood. Actually, I really hate him. I wish I could never see him again. Seeing him this angry, she was also a bit scared, so she hurriedly went forward to explain to him. What are you saying all this to this prince for? It's not like you're related to this prince. This prince is not interested in your love debts at all. At this time, his mind was already occupied by the two of them being intimate just now. He had a belly full of anger with nowhere to vent, so when he saw her become even angrier, the words he said became even more hurtful. After he finished speaking, Xiaohou saw a hurt expression flash across her face. His heart became even more irritated and he wanted to leave this place. These words made Pang Zhijing's heart tremble, as if there were many thorns pricking her heart. She was still digesting what he had just said and the wound in her heart had not been healed yet. Seeing that he was about to leave without even looking at her, she immediately ran in front of him to stop him. She carefully reached out her hand to grab his sleeve, not daring to touch his hand. Xiaohou, listen to me explain. Yu Qingxi and I are not like what you think. Before she could finish, she was once again cut off by Xiaohou. Pang Zhijing, this king will say it again. No matter what kind of entanglement you have with Yu Qingxi, this king does not care. But if you dare to continue interacting with Yu Qingxi after the marriage, then don't blame this king for being impolite. Don't forget, you are only a chess piece in this king's plan. Squashing you to death is the same as squashing an ant. You are not the only one who can marry the princess. Xiaohou looked at her coldly, as if he was looking at a stranger who had nothing to do with him. She was stung by his gaze. Chapter 1267. Those words were so hurtful. Because of his words, Pang Zhijing's face gradually lost all color. Only a chess piece. Just like an ant. It doesn't have to be you. These words made her feel even more bitter and bitter than the words before. Previously, she knew that he had misunderstood her relationship with Yu Qingxi in a fit of anger. Those were unrelated, so she could understand. But these words had already exposed her position in his heart. A chess piece with no freedom, an ant, a puppet that could be replaced at any time. Xiaohou, in your heart, what am I? Although this was the truth, when she thought about how he had been so obedient to her during this period of time, it was like giving a person walking in the desert a glimmer of water, so she still didn't believe it and couldn't help but ask. Pang Zhijing, other than that marriage contract, we have nothing to do with each other. Could it be that you still have extravagant hopes for this prince? Xiaohou said coldly. So that glimmer of water was only a mirage. It was so beautiful, but it was only a mirage. It was like giving hope, but then personally destroying it. He was cold-blooded and emotionless, iron-blooded and heartless. If he didn't have a motive, how could he be so sincere to someone? She laughed mockingly in her heart. She clearly knew that he was this kind of person, so why did she still have hope for him? After Xiaohou finished speaking, he saw her pale face and felt very regretful. But he also felt that he was very unfamiliar at this time, as if he was a tiger that could explode at any time. This feeling was very uncontrollable. He had to leave this place to be able to clearly see what was wrong with him. So he looked at the small hand grabbing his sleeve and ordered with a cold face, "Let go." Hearing his unfamiliar and cold voice, Peng Zhijing slowly lowered her head. She felt like something in her heart was slowly cracking and then shattering bit by bit. She felt that this thing called happiness, after coming here, was always very far away from her. The more she wanted to grasp it, the more she couldn't grasp it. Her originally glossy fingertips turned white. She slowly let go of her fingers and watched as the piece of robe fell from her fingertips. Her lips slowly curved with a faint self-mockery. When Xiao Ho felt the force on his sleeve disappear, he didn't feel relaxed. It was as if he had lost something in his heart, empty and without any sense of strength. However, he quickly suppressed this strange emotion with an invisible hand. Then, he glanced at her, who had her head lowered, and finally strode away without looking back. When he was about to walk out of the courtyard, Peng Zhijing raised her head. She only saw that piece of robe fluttering in the air, and then it disappeared along with its owner. For some people, if they were destined not to have them, then they should not approach them at the beginning. If they approached them, then they should not go deeper. If they went deeper, then they should not be tempted. If they were tempted, then they should not miss them. She had wanted to explain to him that she no longer treated Yu Qingxi the way she did in the past. But, there was no need. Because he didn't listen. And she didn't have any desire to explain herself. At this moment, Jasper was brought in by Lu Er. Lu Er didn't notice that something was wrong with her master and skipped over. Princess, Lu Er went to the kitchen to bring desserts and saw Sister Jasper on the way back, so I brought her in. She said she had something important to tell you. Jasper stepped forward. Princess, my young miss asked this subordinate to bring you a message. Peng Zhijing restrained the emotions on her face. Although she was still a little lonely, she was much better. She immediately said, then invite Miss Jasper Indiana. Lu Er, guard the door. Don't let anyone in. Lu nodded obediently. She then brought Jasper into the room. Jasper clearly felt that something was wrong with Peng Zhijing, but as a subordinate, she didn't have the right to ask. Thus, she shut her mouth. After Lu Er closed the door and cut off the sounds outside, Peng Zhijing turned and asked, Miss Jasper, what message did your master ask you to bring? Jasper looked around. After making sure that it was safe and no one was eavesdropping, she said with relief. My master asked this subordinate to tell you that the 7 keys of the exquisite lock have been forged. Your freedom is just around the corner. 3 days later, Prince Yi will go to the Hugua temple. We will rescue you out of the city on that day. Because of the serious trauma in her heart, she should have been very surprised and happy to hear this news. However, she was only calm and relieved. Did your master say how to rescue me? How should I cooperate with you? Jasper nodded and continued, 3 days later, our people will disguise as the coachman in the courier station and take you away. Then, we will take you out of the city to the suburbs. At that time, we will disguise it as a frightened carriage. You will fall from the carriage and die from disfigurement. Of course, we have already found a substitute. Peng Zhijing heard this plan and felt that there was no problem. However, this substitute, seeing through her thoughts, Jasper explained, this substitute is a corpse. Don't worry, we won't hurt the innocent. She was finally relieved. Then I will have to trouble you at that time. She said gratefully. This is all designed by my master. You can tell my master face to face when you have the chance. Jasper replied. Peng Zhijing nodded but frowned slightly. She was a little worried, did your master say where to send me? She was a little worried that she would never see Qing Yan again. Jasper shook her head, my master said that in order to avoid trouble, you will be sent to a place far away from the capital city. However, I don't know the specific location. My master also said that after the dust has settled here, you can go anywhere you want. Peng Zhijing nodded, that's good. If my identity is discovered, all of this will be in vain. Princess, don't worry. My master has also arranged several guards for you. They are all first-class experts and will protect your safety. As for the exquisite lock, because there are many eyes and ears in the relay station, we are afraid that you will be discovered if you unlock it. So after 3 days, when you get on the carriage, our people will naturally give you the key." After Jasper left, Peng Zhijing's ears were still echoing with her words. Once the exquisite lock was unlocked and she left, she would regain her freedom and fly away. She would no longer be restrained by others and be a useless puppet. She sat on the bed, her fingers unconsciously caressing the 7 orifices exquisite lock on her ankle. She took off the cloth, revealing the exquisite anklet. The crisp sound of the bell spread out in all directions. She fell into silence because of the sound of the bell. Freedom was already within reach. However, she was not happy at all. Perhaps it was because Xiao Ho's words today had hit her too hard. But there was already no connection between them, so what was the point of thinking so much? If she didn't explain today, she probably wouldn't have the chance to say it again. The secret love hidden in her heart might become her secret. So be it. Since she was going to leave, there was no need to torture each other with beautiful memories. Perhaps if he knew that she was dead, he wouldn't even bat an eyelid. This might be the best ending. She closed her eyes and a tear fell from the corner of her eye. Chapter 1268. After Jasper returned, she truthfully reported her conversation with Peng Zhijing at the relay station. Chu Qingyan couldn't help but smile after hearing the report. "It seems that this little girl also doesn't want to part with me. This makes me feel better." After hearing this, Jasper felt that her master treated Peng Zhijing differently. She took the risk of sending her away from the capital. If this was exposed in the future, she would be going against the entire southern Song, Sichuan, and Prince Yi. She thought for a moment and said, "Master, this subordinate saw that the princess seemed to be in low spirits just now. She seemed to have lost her soul. I don't know what happened." Hearing this, Chu Qingyan couldn't help but raise her eyebrows. She put down the teacup lid in her hand and pondered for a moment. "When you entered the relay station, did you see anyone enter the princess courtyard?" This subordinate didn't see anyone. At this point, Jasper immediately added, "Lu He said that Yu Qingxi and Prince Yi arrived at the courtyard one after the other and left one after the other." Yu Qingxi. Who is this person? This name sounded familiar to her, but she couldn't remember who it was. Jasper recalled Lu Er's introduction. He is the Southern Song official in charge of the bridal procession this time. His position isn't low. He used to be the person that the princess liked, but he didn't like the princess and was disgusted by some of the princess' actions. But today, for some reason, he suddenly thought of looking for the princess. Chu Qingyan blinked as she pieced all the clues together and imagined a melodramatic drama in her head. If all of this was based on the fact that Xiao Ho cared about Zhijing, then Zhijing and Yu Qingxi's meeting caused Xiao Ho to misunderstand, causing Zhijing to be unable to explain herself. Then, the two of them quarreled because of this. In this way, the matter had an answer. If this was the case, it would be a very sad thing for Zhijing to have such a thing happen on the eve of their parting. Who wouldn't want to leave a good impression on the other person before leaving? What a pity, but all of this was just her guess. Alright, let's not worry about this for now. Send someone to monitor the relay station. I guarantee that nothing will go wrong. However, Chu Qingyan didn't know that her guess was not far from the truth. Jasper immediately accepted the order and went to work. As soon as Jasper left, Xining came in with a letter in her hand. "Mistress, the guard outside said that someone sent this letter to you." Xining handed the letter over. As she took the letter, she asked, "Did they say who sent the letter?" Xining shook her head and said strangely, "The guard said that the man left immediately after delivering the letter. He didn't say anything else." After hearing this, Chu Qingyan opened the envelope with a puzzled expression, only to see a piece of paper with an orchid base. She opened it and saw that it said, "See you at Huifeng Tea House in the afternoon," and signed with the word, month. She didn't need to read the content. Just by looking at the handwriting, she could tell at a glance that it was Dong Ting's handwriting. However, just as she was about to put down the envelope, a few orchids poured out. She pinched the petals, and there was still a rich fragrance that made people feel relaxed and happy. She couldn't help but laugh. Only this guy could make such a scene. However, this fragrance reminded her that the scent on his body seemed to be orchids. Who would have thought that such a devilishly charming person would have a noble and proud orchid fragrance on his body? Just thinking about it didn't match. However, if he were to stand like a normal person, there would be an indescribable elegance to him. Seeing her mistress smile helplessly, Xining couldn't help but ask curiously, "Mistress, what's written on it?" "Dong Ting asked me to catch up. I have to go out later," she said as she put away the letter. Just as she finished speaking, a voice sounded from outside the door. "Where are you going?" She turned around and saw De Bing walking in. She couldn't help but wave the envelope in her hand. "A friend invited me. I'll go out in an hour. You can take care of dinner yourself." "Friend?" Xiao Su raised his eyebrows slightly. "Higashio Motetsu." Her eyes lit up in surprise. "De Bing, you guessed right." "That's right, it's Dong Ting." Xiao Su was slightly surprised. This was an analysis, not a guess. The little fellow's friends in the capital could be counted on one hand. The few closest friends didn't even need to write a letter. They directly came to her. The people she met at the banquet and Hugua Temple were all women. Generally, they would use an invitation card instead of a letter. Therefore, after eliminating the possibility, there was only Higashio Motetsu left. However, Xiao Su didn't have a very good impression of this potential love rival. This was because the Moon Palace couldn't get away from the few times that the little fellow had been schemed against. Perhaps he didn't participate, but it didn't mean that he was innocent. Moreover, the Moon Palace had done a lot of dirty things during this period of time. They had done a lot of outrageous things for the right minister and consort Yu. This made Xiao Su even more worried about the little fellow's trip. "Do you need me to go with you?" Chu Qingyan was playing with the orchids, thinking about how to put them in the pages of the book. When she heard De Bing's words, she didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "I'm just going to see a friend. Don't be so nervous. And you've forgotten what happened last time. If it weren't for Dong Ting, I'm afraid I wouldn't be your fiancé now, so don't worry." That being said, Xiao Su still had a knot in his heart. It was like putting his most cherished treasure in front of a greedy hunter. He felt like a sheep in a tiger's mouth. He said that he wouldn't interfere with her circle of friends, respect her privacy, and wouldn't tell her what to do with her life. Now he felt a kind of unspeakable bitterness. However, he knew that the little fellow had a sense of propriety. After knowing that Higashio Motetsu stood on the opposite side of them, she was still willing to be with him. She must have her own ideas. He believed in her. After seeing De Bing's expression change, he finally returned to normal. She knew that De Bing wouldn't stop her or follow her to the tea house. She said happily, "Then I'll change my clothes." "Change clothes?" "No." He immediately denied it. "Why?" Not only Chu Qingyan was surprised, but Xining was also a little confused. If she went out to see Higashio Motetsu and changed her clothes, wouldn't he see a better side of the little fellow? Although it was already very good now, he still felt very uncomfortable. The little fellow could only show that side to him. But at this time, in the face of the little fellow's suspicion, he could only casually make up an excuse. "Your clothes are already very good. You don't need to change them. It's too troublesome. It takes time and energy. It's impolite to let your friend wait for a long time. Which girl wouldn't be happy to be praised? And it was her sweetheart." Chu Qingyan blushed slightly. "Then I won't change. Although it's still early, I can go out in advance to wait for Dong Ting." After that, she said goodbye to De Bing, and then called Xining and Jasper to go to the courtyard. Xiao Su, who stayed in the room, twitched the corner of his mouth. Why did he say that sentence just now? Chapter 1269. However, the little guy had already walked far away. At this time, Xiao Su called out, "Huling. Master, do you have any orders? This subordinate just saw the little princess and her entourage go out. He had just returned from outside and successfully completed his master and the little princess's task. As soon as he entered the door, he was summoned by his master and reported the little princess's whereabouts. Today's weather is good, let's go out for a stroll. Xiao Su looked at the dark clouds above his head and said without changing his expression. Huling also said without changing his expression, Master, where do you want to go? There's no place to go, just follow behind Ian. Huling swallowed his saliva. Since he was together with the little princess, his master's ability to lie through his teeth had increased day by day. He was almost on par with the little princess. Yes. Remember, don't let Ian find out that we are following behind. Yes. Huling snickered in his heart. Where did the little princess go that made his master so worried that he had to secretly follow her? But he definitely didn't dare to say it in front of his master, otherwise he would be beaten. Thus, Chu Qingyan slowly walked forward with Jasper and Jean Xian, not knowing that they were being followed by a big tail. The Xiao Qi, who was hiding in the dark, began to struggle with Xiao Su who was tailing them. Su Yi, Su Er, what does His Highness want to do with Master? Should we tell Master? Su Er, His Highness definitely won't hurt Master. He loves Master too much, not to mention that His Highness used to be our Master. Su Er, but the current Master is our Master. Su Yi, Su Er, Su San, and all the Xiao Qi fell into silence. To tell or not to tell? But the one in front was their master, and the one behind was also their master. So tangled, so contradictory, so struggling, so painful. Forget it, everyone unanimously decided that they didn't see anything, so there was no need to struggle anymore. Yes, that's it. If Chu Qingyan knew that her howling cavalry had struggled for so long to reach such a conclusion, she would probably want to throw them into the Fuli mountain range for training. Because it was still early, Chu Qingyan took them to the stalls. For the past few days, she had been staying in the prince's mansion and did not go out much. Grass was about to grow on her head. Now, he was like a runaway pony, shuttling back and forth between the various vendors. Because she was wearing a veil hat, no one knew who she was. She didn't have to worry about her identity to restrain her words and actions, so she acted more freely. Xiao Su, who was following them from a distance, was also wearing a veil hat. However, the noble aura that he exuded and the perfect proportions of his broad shoulders and narrow waist made many women who were passing by stop in their tracks. However, the other party did not pay any attention to them at all. His gaze was fixed on the person in front of him. Those women also followed his gaze, only to see a vast sea of people. They didn't know which one he liked. At this time, Xiao Su was coldly staring at those people who were secretly looking at his little fellow. He knew that no matter if the little fellow revealed her true appearance or covered her face, she still had a kind of beauty that people could not ignore. This kind of beauty was not something that could be created through clothes, hair, or jewelry. It was an elegance that came from within. So even if her true appearance could not be seen, she could still receive all kinds of greedy and admiring gazes as she walked. But the little fellow did not notice that Xiao Su was fiercely glaring at those people. His people, he did not even allow others to stare at them. As such, those who had pretended to approach Chu Qingyan unintentionally suddenly felt an eerie cold wind blowing from behind them. They couldn't help but take 2 steps to the side, and that feeling disappeared. However, the moment they got close to Chu Qingyan again, they would feel as if their entire body had been frozen. It really was strange. In the end, other than women, there were no men around Chu Qingyan. Seeing this result, Xiao Su was satisfied as he continued to follow her. Hualing stood on the side and saw the entire process. He unconsciously swallowed. This kind of master was very good, very strong, and very scary. Only the little princess could make his master reveal such an unusual appearance. He really wanted those people who said his master had a paralyzed face to see that his master was normal. The little girl happily jumped from one stall to another. She looked very lively and energetic, which made Xiao Su, who was paying attention to her, a little spellbound. He was used to the little fellow's calmness in managing the food, her gentleness in treating the servants, her steadiness in taking care of her parents, and her calmness in the face of danger. He had almost forgotten that she was still a child not yet 16. Maybe a girl at this age was not suitable to be called a child, but seeing her this lively and happy, he finally realized that this was what she should be like at her age. Over the years, he had faced too much pressure. Not only did he have to deal with the capital, he also had to protect his fief and the secret of the Fuli mountain range. Unknowingly, the little fellow had also been affected by him, slowly hiding the nature that her age should have. She had gone through life and death with him, entering and exiting the gates of hell several times, but she had never complained or been afraid. Only at the moment of life and death would she show reluctance and worry. He suddenly felt that he owed her too much over the years. He couldn't create a protective barrier for her and he had to let her live in fear, never having a sense of security. Every time he saw her reveal a rarely seen childishness, Xiao Su's heart would feel a deep sense of guilt. He suddenly stopped in his tracks. Huo Ling was walking when he almost bumped into his master's back. He immediately jumped away and poked his head out from behind, asking in a confused voice, "Master, the tea house is in front." This subordinate saw the little princess go in. "We need to hurry up and book the room next to theirs. That way, it will be easier for you to supervise." No, it's to accompany the little princess." Yeah, he almost spilled the beans. He hoped that his master wouldn't take it to heart. He didn't want to increase his training tomorrow. Xiao Su slightly lowered his eyes. There was an indescribable light hidden in his dark eyes and it was impossible to see his current mood through the veil. "Let's go back." Huo Ling, who was thinking about what position he should use to eavesdrop, was suddenly dumbfounded. "Master, we finally managed to follow." A sharp gaze shot over and Huo Ling immediately shut up. He would do whatever his master said and he would obediently stand on the side as the background. Xiao Su turned to look at the tea house and revealed a faint smile. Since he said that he would give her enough freedom, then he could not go back on his words. The only happy time she had, he could not take it away from her. Xiao Su looked away and suddenly turned to a corner of the tea house, releasing his internal strength. Su Yi and the others were scattered all over the tea house, silently guarding their master. At this time, a wave of pressure came over, making them tremble slightly. Then, at the same time, they met His Highness's gaze, which was asking them to take good care of their master. They immediately nodded and swore to protect him with their lives. Xiao Su looked away again and gave orders before leaving. "Pay close attention to when General Li enters the capital." Huo Ling paused. This sudden sentence, he immediately understood. His master was becoming more and more impatient to leave with the little princess. Didn't this mean that they would soon have a little master? The corners of his mouth curled up, and he immediately agreed cheerfully. His footsteps fluttered as he followed. Chapter 1270. Sitting in a tea house with an open window facing the street, a person was currently standing there. Higashio Motetsu looked down at the black figure slowly disappearing into the crowd. He originally wanted to see the little girl arrive in advance, but he didn't expect to see Xiao Su following behind her. A subtle smile appeared on his pale face. In this world, the only person who treated the little girl with the most sincerity and without any reservations was him. Everyone thought that the undefeated war god Bloodthirsty was heartless, but when a cold-hearted person was moved, they were the most affectionate. To be able to go to this extent for a woman, that was true love. At this moment, there was a knock on the door. He guessed that the little girl was about to arrive. He closed his eyes and circulated his internal energy. His pale face was forced to turn red by the circulation of his internal energy. Then, it slowly became rosy, without a trace of illness. He ordered Xuanqi Zimo to open the door while he continued to lean against the soft couch under the window. His expression was languid as usual. Chu Qingyan didn't know that she had been followed the whole way. Her footsteps were light as she entered the room. When she saw him, she immediately put on a stern expression. When Higashio Motetsu saw her expression change, he thought that it was because he hadn't been able to cover up his complexion. Just as he was about to circulate his internal energy again, he saw her angrily walk in front of him. She slammed the small tea table on the couch. "If you don't give me an explanation for what happened last time, I won't drink tea with you." It was completely like a child throwing a tantrum. "If you don't tell me, I'll break off all relations with you." It was a different approach, but it had the same effect. Higashio Motetsu sighed in relief. So it wasn't because of her complexion. However, her words caused him to slightly knit his brows. The little girl was talking about an explanation. Was she talking about the poisoning incident from 2 days ago with Huang Yi, or the falling into the water incident before that? He realized that in this short period of time, the Moon Palace had already made a move against her so many times. When he wasn't aware, did they make a move against her? When he thought of this, his mood became somewhat gloomy. When she first came in, she only wanted to scare him. Who told him to always disappear without a trace? Looking for him was like looking for a needle in a haystack. But looking at his expression, it seemed that something was wrong. Chu Qingyan immediately retracted her questioning look and asked worriedly, "Hey, are you all right? Is it because you disobeyed me and got scolded for falling into the water last time? Did I poke at your sore spot? If so, I apologize." She was a flexible person. When it came to her friends, no matter who was in the wrong, she would definitely be the first to apologize. Someone once said that in a relationship, the person who bowed down first could tell who cared more. Hearing her concerned and nervous voice, he felt the deep wounds in his heart, as if they were surrounded by warm spring water, nourishing his heart that was full of holes bit by bit. The little girl was right about one thing. He was indeed punished, but he wouldn't feel sad about it. Higashio Motetsu raised his head and looked at the person who was looking at him with a half-bent waist. He smiled slightly, and suddenly, it was as bright as the sun, almost blinding her eyes. What could happen to this young master? I just wanted to trick this little girl to see if you would fall for it. As expected, you still care about this young master. Just as he finished speaking, a bump appeared on his head. Chu Qingyan retracted her hand and turned to sit by the table. She was quite a distance away from him before she slowly said, "Looks like you're quite free. Then answer my question. What exactly happened with falling into the water? Why were you in the palace? Were you the mastermind or the accomplice?" She was clearly asking about his innocence, but the little girl gave people the feeling that she was just casually asking about it. She had always been intelligent, so how could she not guess? Don't you already have the answer in your heart? Higashio Motetsu twirled a strand of hair around his shoulder around his finger and played with it, giving her a devilish smile. But in her eyes, this scene became a coquettish gesture. She couldn't help but facepalm. Why did a handsome man have to make such a gesture? He simply didn't give women a way out. She regained her composure and said with a faint smile, "All right, then I'll guess. You're only responsible for saying yes or no." This sounded like a pretty good game. Higashio Motetsu agreed without hesitation. "Consort, you set up this trap for me?" "Yes." "Consort, you and the Moon Palace sect are working together?" "Yes." "Consort, you wants to use the Moon Palace sect's influence to pave the way for Xiao Ran?" "Yes." "Were you coerced by them to help them?" Higashio Motetsu was about to say the answer without hesitation, but he stopped at the last moment and swallowed the words. He looked at the person who was calmly staring at him in shock. After a while, he finally asked, "Little girl, are you trying to trick me?" The words from before were just a prelude. Her last question was her true motive. What shocked him the most was, how did she see through it? He remembered that after leaving Jiangnan, they had very few opportunities to meet. Moreover, he had hidden it so well that it should have been impossible for her to find out. Chu Qingyan crossed her arms and looked at him coldly. "But you seem to be very vigilant. Are you afraid that I'll discover your secret? Were you really coerced into doing this?" Fortunately, he had reacted quickly and didn't fall into her trap. Thus, He relaxed his body and lay down like a softie. He supported his cheek with one hand and looked at her lazily. Do you think that someone like this young master would be coerced into doing something? Little girl, can you stop joking around? This isn't funny at all. Chu Qingyan narrowed her eyes and tried to determine the truth of his words. However, the face in front of her was too devilish and impeccable. She couldn't tell whether he was telling the truth or not. That's right, this person was so cunning. He was the one who schemed against others. How could he be coerced? Thinking of this, she relaxed. All right, I won't joke around with you. Oh right, didn't you want to treat me to tea? Where's the tea? Where are the refreshments? Hearing her impatient glare at him and no longer ask the question, he breathed a sigh of relief again. He clapped his hands and soon, someone came to serve tea and refreshments. The tea here is not bad. Try it. He raised his hand and gestured. Chu Qingyan picked up the teacup without hesitation and placed it under her nose to take a whiff. The fragrance was rich and refreshing. She took a sip and found that it was warm and refreshing. She nodded and said, "This is good tea." Higashio Motetsu took out a folding fan from somewhere and fanned himself. He said proudly, "How can it be bad if it's recommended by this young master?" Chu Qingyan stared at him in amusement. He was really going to open a dye house just because she gave him some color. However, she wasn't going to argue with a proud child about this. At this moment, Higashio Motetsu saw her and clapped her hands. The servant girls standing on both sides of her stepped forward and placed the things in their hands on the table before respectfully retreating. Chapter 1271. These are. Ever since the little lass came in, his attention had been on her and he had not noticed that these servant girls were holding things. It's impolite not to reciprocate, she said with a smile. Her eyes were bright, and specks of light flickered in the depths of her eyes, causing people to sink into them. Higashio Motetsu greedily looked at her pretty face and said carelessly, "Oh? What's that?" Chu Qingyan did not notice his actions. Her finger tapped on the box and she said with a smile, "Won't you know when you open it?" Hearing her words, Higashio Motetsu looked at the boxes on the table and interest flashed through his eyes. He stood up and walked towards the tea table. Walking in front of the first box, he looked at the little lass who was urging him with her hands on her cheeks. He bent his lips and opened it. When he saw what was inside, he couldn't help but widen his eyes. This. He took out a folding fan with gold filigree. To be more precise, it was made of gold filigree. He slowly opened the fan and saw a picture of a blooming lotus flower with several carps playing under the lotus leaves. It looked very lifelike. This was not the main point. The main point was that the lotus flower was hollow, but when the sun shone on it, he found that it was not really hollow. There seemed to be a thin and transparent cloth in the middle, like the wings of a butterfly. When it was fanned, there was a sweet fragrance that assailed his nostrils. The wind was very strong and did not lose to any folding fan. When he held this folding fan in his hand, although it felt lighter than other folding fans, its value was far higher than any of the fans he had seen. It was priceless. Higashio Motetsu turned his head to look at the person who was looking at his expression with interest. "Little lass, is this a gold filigree fan? At least you know what's good for you." "Not bad, this is what you people who pretend to be cultured use. I know you like to use fans, so I spent a lot of effort to find this one. It's better than the one I gave you before." Chu Qingyan felt a sense of accomplishment when she saw that he couldn't bear to part with it. She smiled and said, "It's fine." Higashio Motetsu looked at her and sighed with a smile, "No matter what it is, as long as it's from you, I will cherish it." Even if it was a stone, he would take good care of it. The seriousness in his voice made her slightly stunned and then she revealed a brilliant smile. He was indeed her good friend. It felt good to be treasured like this. "There's also a box here. It's filled with your favorite food that I bought on the way here." As she spoke, she opened the lunchbox. The box was filled with all kinds of pastries. She knew that he didn't like sweet things, so she had bought salty ones. He stared blankly for a moment. These were all things that he had inadvertently mentioned when he was eating. He didn't expect the little girl to still remember them. In his heart, an indescribable emotion suddenly welled up. It was as if these colorful colors were embellishing his pale white world and flashing in his sky. Why don't you try a piece and see if it tastes like jiangnan? I've never eaten these before, so I don't know if they taste like jiangnan. She handed him a pair of chopsticks and smiled. Under the urging of the little girl, he took the chopsticks and put a piece into his mouth. It melted in his mouth, and the stuffing was delicious. Although it was not as good as the local delicacies of Jiangnan, it was the best he had eaten in the capital. Moreover, it was brought to him by the little girl, which made it even more delicious. Is it good? Seeing the smile on his face, she knew she had bought the right thing. She took a piece and put it in her mouth. Instantly, she exclaimed, "It tastes really good. I've decided to get a piece of this flavor in the future." Seeing her greedy little kitten appearance, his heart softened and he couldn't help but eat a few more pieces. Beside them, Xuanqi Zimo was trembling with fear. The young palace master's body was not in the right condition to eat these things, but he had received a warning from the young palace master not to act rashly. He could only stand there anxiously. It was easy to get sick of eating too many pastries. Chu Qingyan poured a cup of tea for herself and Dongting to get rid of the grease. Chu Qingyan hugged the teacup and said with some confusion, "Oh right, why did you suddenly want to see me today? Aren't you afraid that the people behind you will find out and investigate our past? They'll follow the clues and think that we're in cahoots." When Higashio Motetsu heard this, he chuckled. "Do I have to give a reason every time I look for you? Then what should I give you? Tell me that this young master misses you and misses you like crazy. How about that?" Chu Qingyan glared at him in annoyance. "I'm being serious with you." Unexpectedly, Higashio Motetsu's reply was even more shameless. "I'm also being serious with you." She had already given up on communicating with him. He was too damn hard to deal with. Seeing her look of hopelessness, Higashio Motetsu couldn't help but smile. If those girls in the capital saw that seductive look of hers, he was afraid that the doorstep of his family's marriage proposal would be trampled to pieces, and the sachets thrown by the girls would probably be enough to smash him to death. Xuanqi Zimo grumbled inwardly. Fortunately, the two of them were wearing veiled hats to hide their identities. However, when they met someone they knew, they would usually remove the veil and reveal their true faces. "All right, I'll stop teasing you. I heard that you'll be leaving the capital in a few days, so I took advantage of the good weather today to ask you out to catch up." Chu Qingyan was slightly surprised. "How did you know that Big Ice Cube and I were leaving?" "That's because this young master is omnipotent." Higashio Motetsu smugly waved his newly obtained golden silk fan proudly. "Speak human." Higashio Motetsu rubbed his nose. "When your family's highness left the imperial study, leaving the capital was no longer a secret. You have to believe that in the imperial palace, unless it's a secret, no matter how small the matter is, it can't be hidden, let alone such a big matter. Of course, not many people know about it." Chu Qingyan sighed in relief, but his next words almost choked her to death. "But we already know what we need to know," Higashio Motetsu lazily said. This was the truth. He needed to remind the girl that the Moon Palace wasn't the only one hiding in the dark. So he had to tell her to be more careful and vigilant. "Then isn't it a secret?" She pursed her lips. "You could say that. Although the Emperor has kept it a secret, the news has already spread in private. It's just that it hasn't reached your ears yet." Higashio Motetsu was still leisurely waving his fan. From time to time, he would caress the patterns on the fan as if he couldn't bear to part with it. However, for some reason, the redness on his face had begun to fade. However, Chu Qingyan didn't notice this. Her mind was completely focused on the news of them leaving the capital. If they know that we're leaving, then they also know that Big Ice Cube doesn't want to fight for the throne. Will they stop targeting us? Not necessarily. Chapter 1272. When Higashio Motetsu heard this, he couldn't help but find it funny. How could things be so simple? Why? We've already left, don't tell me they still want to kill us all. Chu Qingyan angrily clenched her fists, a wave of anger spiraling in her heart. Her angry little face lit up, as if it had lit up her entire face, making her even more lively and beautiful. He shifted his gaze from her face to the golden silk fan in his hand and chuckled. Little girl, do you know that there's a method called cutting the weeds and removing the roots to prevent future trouble? You think you've left, but it doesn't mean that others will think you've simply left. They're more worried about your backlash, so it's better to strike first. She was stunned. Dong Ting's words were not without reason. Sensing her emotions, Higashio Motetsu turned his eyes, his beautiful face revealing a comforting expression. What do you have to worry about? The King of England is not to be trifled with. Didn't you fight a bloody battle with him? Don't you know his strength? Although he didn't want to mention this person, in order to comfort the little girl, he could only bring him up. When Chu Qingyan heard this, her entire face lit up even more. She clenched her fists, her eyes full of trust, then nodded towards Dong Ting and smiled. You're right, even if there are thorns and wild beasts in front of us, Big Ice Block and I will not be afraid. If we meet gods, we'll kill gods, if we meet Buddha, we'll kill Buddha. No one can stop our footsteps. The person in front of him exuded a confident glow, the light that burst out from her eyes made people ignore her appearance, only seeing the vast and domineering brilliance that was like a river of stars. It made his eyes blur slightly, he couldn't help but lower his head, a trace of sadness flashing in his eyes. This kind of woman, competing with the moon for splendor, competing with the flowers for beauty, it was probably impossible to find another woman in the whole world who was so radiant. Xiao Su was really lucky. Yes, even if you encounter danger, you can overcome it. He smiled and said. Of course, don't you know who I am? After the nervousness, she was only left with mischief. Higashio Motetsu couldn't help but smile. Miss Chu, don't tell me you've forgotten your own name. Chu Qingyan couldn't help but roll her eyes. This joke isn't funny. But after saying that, the two looked at each other and couldn't help but laugh. Friends are like this, no matter how long they haven't seen each other, once they meet again. This is a true friend. Chu Qingyan looked at the person in front of her, who was always flirting with her, and couldn't help but smile. She didn't have many friends, but everyone treated her with sincerity, and that was enough. Because the two chatted for a long time, and it was quickly approaching evening, to teat s's. Tut. It the that she that. Chu Qingyan rolled her eyes. Then, she turned to look at the sky that was slowly being dyed red by the setting sun. Her mind was filled with the image of Big Ice Cube's unhappy expression when they left today. She couldn't help but lower her head and smile. Inadvertently, he saw this shy look, like a flash of light in the middle of the night, dazzling but fleeting. It was also like the moment before a lotus flower bloomed, beautiful but brief. He didn't know what she was thinking, but in this world, there was no other person who could make her reveal such an expression. He felt his chest surge, and the taste of blood filled his mouth. He gripped the corner of the table tightly, barely suppressing the surging blood in his body, and slowly regaining his composure. At this time, Chu Qingyan turned to look at him, her expression a little apologetic. I might not be able to accompany you for dinner, I have to go back. I'll owe you this time, when we're leaving the capital, I'll definitely let you send me off. I won't go back until you're drunk. Her apologetic tone and soft expression had already melted his heart into a puddle of water. He hooked a devilish smile. You won't go back until I'm drunk? You've really planned it out well. She laughed mischievously. If we're both drunk, who's going to send you home? Look at how considerate I am, how much I take care of you. Looking at her self-praising appearance, his heart couldn't help but move. After hesitating for a moment, he still followed his heart. He raised his hand and placed it on her head, rubbing her soft hair. Little girl, if you can leave the capital, go as far as you can and don't come back. The court is dangerous, it's not as safe as the common people or the Jianghu. If you're here, I won't be at ease. She originally thought that he was playing a prank and wanted to slap his hand away, but she heard these sincere and earnest words. For the first time, from his frivolous words, she felt entrusted, solemn, sighed, and an indescribable sadness. She couldn't help but want to raise her head to look at his expression, but because of the difference in height and his hand on her head, she couldn't raise her head at all. She thought of their positions, of how that had taken her away from the river without hesitation. She lowered her head and slowly spoke. Dong Ting, when will you leave this troublesome place? She clearly felt his hand pause, then slowly stroked her head again. If there's a chance, I'll go find you. His soft laughter was accompanied by his unique voice, beautiful and pleasant to the ears. After saying this, the weight on her head was removed, and she couldn't help but raise her head to look at him, still with that frivolous expression. Dong Ting, before, I suspected that you were threatened to do bad things, so I rushed to meet you today. But now, I'm relieved. Her gentle eyes carried a smile as she vowed solemnly, but if anyone wants to hurt you, you can tell me. I don't need the power of the big ice block to help you teach them a lesson. He stared blankly at the person in front of him. She clearly didn't reach his shoulder and was so petite and lovable, but she seriously said that she would protect him. A warm current flowed from his heart to his limbs, soaking his cold body and mind in a hot spring. He chuckled softly, silly girl, how can a scourge like me be bullied by others? You should be worried about yourself. Chu Qingyan unhappily glared at him, I'm not going to talk to you anymore. I'm going home. When she passed by him, she made a face at him, then she proudly swaggered away with her two maidservants. He smiled faintly and leaned against the soft window sill, his gaze falling on the entrance of the tea-house. It wasn't until that crimson figure appeared and then disappeared into the crowd that he removed the inner force that was suppressing his body. His face rapidly turned pale. If Chu Qingyan was still here, she would probably be shocked. Master, you've seen Miss Chu. Let this subordinate find a doctor for you. Before Xuanqi Zimo could finish speaking, he cried out in alarm, Master, you. Higashio Motetsu found him noisy, so he frowned slightly and lowered his head to look at the golden fan. There was a drop of blood where the lotus flower bloomed, and soon, another drop of blood dripped down. He didn't care at all about the blood flowing from the corner of his mouth. After casually wiping it, he took a handkerchief from the side and carefully wiped the blood stains on the golden fan. This was a gift from the little girl, so he mustn't dirty it. If the little girl got angry and stopped giving him gifts, that would be terrible. Xuanqi Zimo looked at the rare gentle and serious expression on his master's face, and he suddenly had a bold suspicion. Chapter 1273. Because he did not let go of her the entire way, the oil lamp was not lit. When the stone door was closed, the entire secret room fell into an endless darkness. However, this was not a difficult thing for people with strong inner strength. Xiao Su arrived at the bedroom without any obstructions. He placed the person in his arms on the bed and got up to leave. Suddenly, his sleeve was grabbed. In the darkness, he heard the little fellow's confused and panicked voice, Where are you going? Xiao Su bent down, and the corners of his mouth lifted into a playful smile. You want me that badly? As soon as he finished speaking, she immediately let go of his hand. She harumphed, Nonsense. Xiao Su laughed out loud. His clear and bright voice spread throughout the secret room. It was like the sound of a bell ringing in her eardrums. She couldn't help but cover her ears as she silently cursed in her heart. Too bad, Big Ice Cube is too bad. At this time, she heard him explain while holding back his laughter, I'm going to light a lamp. The oil lamp in the room was broken by you, so I can only light the one in the study room. Thinking back to that day, when she was cleaning the room, she felt that the oil lamp was pretty, so she took it down to look at it. However, she accidentally broke it. Now that Big Ice Cube lifted it up, she felt very embarrassed. Because the study room was on the other side of the wall, although there was a door in the middle, the light from the lamp was blocked by the wall. At most, it could only pass through the door. However, the light was much weaker, but at least they could see people's silhouettes. In addition, with their martial arts, they could see clearly in the darkness. This room was very simple. There was only a bed with pillows and blankets on it. There were no other decorations, which suited the big ice cube style of doing things. When Xiao Su returned, she had already sat up and looked around, using this to reduce the nervousness in her heart. When the strong masculine aura surrounded her, she tilted her head to look at the person standing by the bed. The light behind him was very weak, but it added a bit of warmth to his noble aura. She forgot her nervousness and shyness for a moment, looking at his eyes with a bit of infatuation. In such a dark place, his eyes seemed to reflect thousands of stars in the sea, vast and beautiful. She couldn't help but sit up on the bed. She hugged his waist and leaned against his chest. "Big Ice Cube, what are you thinking about?" She saw him staring at her, as if he was thinking. The heat that had just subsided began to boil again when she approached him. His eyes darkened and he lowered his head to seal her lips. Eager and urgent, she couldn't stand it and was forced to lean back. Because she had placed all her weight on him, there was no support for her feet. When he leaned over, she couldn't bear the force and fell backward. Xiao Su pulled her into his arms, and the two of them fell onto the bed. Because Xiao Su had purposely controlled his strength and direction, she didn't feel any pain when she fell. He was supporting himself on both sides of her body, so he didn't put too much force on her. Only, this position of one up and one down was very ambiguous. Their eyes met in the air and the air instantly became hot. In the darkness, although there was a faint light, in her eyes, the only thing left was the pair of scorching eyes. It was as if there were raging flames burning in them. Once she touched them, she would be burned to ashes along with them. She didn't dare look straight at him and wanted to look away. However, he just happened to lean down. While she was in a daze, a light kiss fell between her eyebrows, then fell on her eyes, nose, cheeks, and finally kissed her lips. It wasn't as intense as before, but this time it was as gentle as the wind. She couldn't help muttering in her heart, did the big ice cube change his personality? However, when she was in a daze, she felt her waist loosen. Looking down, her belt was gone. When she looked up again, the big ice cube was holding something in his hand. Wasn't that her belt? She saw him casually throw it on the bed frame, and without waiting for her to react, he kissed her lips. After lingering for a while, he didn't stay any longer. He went all the way down, and the collar of her clothes also went all the way down. "From now on, even if you ask me to stop, I won't agree." When he left mark after mark on her body, he raised his head and lightly bit her lips, and then domineeringly declared. She pouted, she didn't plan to ask him to stop. However, she suddenly realized that from just now until now, his face was still covered by a mask. She was a little unhappy in her heart. She had almost exposed herself to him, but he still wrapped himself up tightly. After he said this, the little fellow didn't have any reaction at all, and the doubts in his heart increased. But at this time, his whole body was suppressed to the point of discomfort, and he planned to ask her later. When he was about to lower his head again, a white little hand suddenly reached out in front of him and easily took off his mask. He saw the mischievous look in her eyes and a smile appeared in his eyes. Chu Qingyan had just taken off his mask when she saw his soul-sucking smile, and she couldn't help being stunned. His ink-black hair hung loosely over his shoulders, covering half of his handsome face. However, his skin was even fairer than a woman's, his nose as tall as a snowy mountain, his soul-stirring eyebrows, and his calm yet mysterious smile became a painting in front of her. It was a picture of a handsome man that was difficult to describe with a brush. She didn't know why, but even though she often saw his face under the mask, she couldn't help being captivated by him every time. Shouldn't she slowly get used to it and then feel that it was normal? Why was it that every time she would be stunned by him and couldn't look away? While she was in a daze, Xiao Su had already taken off his outer clothes, revealing his inner clothes. His clothes were tight and covered his strong body, but it made people daydream and couldn't help but want to have a nosebleed. Chu Qingyan immediately looked away. If this continued, she really would have a nosebleed and embarrass herself. However, Xiaosu didn't seem to plan on letting her go. He held the back of her head with one hand and then continued what he hadn't finished before, while his other hand followed her exquisite curves down. In the darkness, other than the eyes, all of her senses became very sharp. Especially for people like her who practiced martial arts, she was much more sensitive to other people's touch than normal people. At this time, she was also suffering from both ice and fire. She couldn't help but move closer to him, her hands hooked around his neck, wanting to draw more. After an unknown amount of time, she softly moaned and heard him say in her ear, "Just now you said you would help me take care of it. You can start now, En." His suppressed voice was mixed with enduring pain. She knew that he had endured a lot. Her charming face immediately flushed red, and her hand was pulled in a direction. She didn't need to think to know where it was. She had brought this upon herself, so even if she had to bite the bullet, she still had to do it. Very quickly, in the quiet secret room, a man's muffled groan sounded. It was painful and comfortable, as if it was hell and heaven. Chapter 1274. This process seemed to have taken a long time, as though a century had passed. By the time she lay back down on the bed, she was completely exhausted and couldn't care about anything else. At this moment, Xiaosu was panting lightly. His forehead, shoulders, and chest were covered in fine beads of sweat. On his back and arms, there were also some scratches. After the waves of passion in his body slowly subsided, he slowly opened his eyes. The first thing he saw was the person who was panting heavily with her eyes closed. Her clothes were completely removed, and her exquisite curves rose and fell as she panted. His eyes darkened again, but this time, he was able to control the fire of desire in his heart. After all, he had just eaten his fill. He licked the corner of his mouth, which still had the little fellow's scent. His eyes curved slightly, revealing a smile. He reached out and touched her face. When she felt his touch, she rubbed her face against his fingers obediently. He smiled, wrapped her in the thin blanket, and then lifted her up and placed her on his knees. Chu Qingyan, who was exhausted, felt someone moving her. She opened her eyes vigilantly. When she saw that it was a big block of ice, she relaxed and closed her eyes again. She was so tired that she didn't even want to move. She leaned on his broad shoulders, found a comfortable position in his arms, and snuggled in. At this time, his upper body was naked and he was only wearing a pair of underwear. At this time, the little fellow had crawled out of the thin quilt and leaned on his body. When their skin touched, it quickly caused the young body to become restless again. He took a deep breath and covered her body with the blanket again. Only then did he feel at ease and pull her into his arms. At this moment, he was puzzled. At this moment, he heard her shallow breathing, but he didn't know if she could hear it. He hugged her and said softly, "Why are you suddenly taking the initiative today?" Because Yan Luo said, just when Xiaosu thought that she couldn't hear him and was about to give up, he heard her mumbling in a daze. His heart skipped a beat, and he looked at her without blinking. His voice became gentler as he guided her patiently. "What did she say?" "She said that all men have normal needs. If you hold it in, you'll go crazy. That's why she asked me to relieve you." As soon as she finished speaking, the person who had yet to fall asleep suddenly felt the temperature around her plummet. She couldn't help but shrink her neck. Then, it was as if there was a cold wind blowing in her ears. The air around her suddenly became extremely oppressive, and she couldn't help but slowly open her eyes. What entered her eyes was the big ice cube's peerless face. Just as she was about to speak, she saw him staring at her with a strange expression. She suddenly felt a little scared. "Big ice cube, why are you looking at me like that?" She moved, and the thin blanket covering her body slid down, revealing her fragrant shoulders full of ambiguous marks. She immediately wanted to pull the thin blanket up to cover those places. However, she couldn't pull him up no matter how hard she tried. She followed the thin blanket and saw a slender hand pinching the other end with 2 fingers. She couldn't help but blush as she looked up at him. Big ice cube, let go. Xiao Su didn't seem to hear her. Instead, he leaned closer to her and whispered softly. However, the words that came out of his mouth caused her back to stiffen. You just said that if I didn't eat you up, I would go crazy from holding it in. When did she say that? She subconsciously recalled everything that had happened just now. It seemed that she had accidentally let it slip in her sleep. Looking at the sudden change in her expression, he knew that she had recalled it. Xiao Su's expression was unreadable. His gaze was fixed on her body, not missing a single change on her face. So you're worried that I'll go crazy from holding it in? The first sentence made her tremble with fear, but the tone of the second sentence made her hair stand on end. However, his aura was so close that she had nowhere to hide. The big ice cube had become so scary. Previously, Yen Luo had said that the thing that men hated the most was being questioned about their ability in that area. What she had said just now was literally questioning the big ice cube. No wonder the big ice cube suddenly changed. She shrunk her neck and laughed mischievously. She planned to muddle through and said, Big ice cube, I definitely didn't mean anything else. Don't misunderstand. Misunderstand? He withdrew his strength and she leaned closer to him. He looked at her eyes that were so close to his and smiled slightly, revealing a sinister smile. What are you trying to say that I misunderstood? Oh no, she was about to let the cat out of the bag. However, it was too late to take back her words. She laughed mischievously at him. Then, she wanted to sneak out of his embrace and slip away. However, the moment her feet touched the ground, a strong force lifted her up. As the world spun, she felt herself lying back on the couch. Just as she looked up, a dark shadow pressed down on her from above. Her hands were pinned to the couch and her legs were pinned down by him. She couldn't move. She looked at the handsome face that was less than an inch away from her and subconsciously swallowed her saliva. Be big ice cube, it should be very late. Let's go back and rest. Let's rest here tonight. He rejected her request. She didn't give up and said, then move to the side. If you sleep on top, I won't be able to sleep. Xiao Su chuckled in his heart, but he couldn't show it on the surface. This time, he had to thoroughly let the little fellow know that although she took the initiative tonight, he couldn't really eat her up. This was the real torture. He had to hold it in. The previous torture was not worth mentioning at all. Aren't you worried that I'll affect our married life in the future? Now, I have time to verify it with you personally. He lowered his head a little lower, and he would be able to touch her lips. She could clearly feel the warmth of his breath sweeping across her lips as he spoke. She couldn't help but purse her lips and hurriedly came up with an excuse. No need. I've already verified it just now. However, he still pressed on. No, you didn't check carefully just now and I didn't cooperate well. This time, I'll definitely make you satisfied. What the hell was the big ice cube talking about? Very quickly, she understood the meaning of his words. He didn't say anything else and directly sealed her lips, not letting go of a single inch. She felt a chill on her body and the thin blanket had disappeared without a trace. She tried to talk to him, but she didn't have the strength to be entangled with him. However, his attacks were like a prairie fire that quickly engulfed her. So, no matter what you say, don't doubt a man's ability in that aspect. Otherwise, once they were angered, the consequences would be uncontrollable. Because they could torture you in all sorts of ways. Who told you to keep begging for mercy? It turned out that the big ice cube was so scary when he was calculative. This time, she was done for. Previously, Xiao Su still had some reservations with her, afraid that she wouldn't be able to take it. Now, she wouldn't be able to rest for the entire night. Chapter 1275. This time, from midnight to dawn, Chu Qingyan seemed to have been thrown into a vast ocean. The waves swept her up and made her fall again. She was bobbing up and down in the waves without anything to rely on. However, in the sky above the ocean, there were large blocks of ice everywhere. When she finally left the ocean, her strength was exhausted and she gradually fell into a deep sleep. "Ayan, do you still doubt my ability now?" Xiao Su caressed her face and then pulled her into his embrace. He covered her with a thin blanket and pressed his face against hers as he also fell asleep. The two young bodies snuggled up to each other in an intimate position, as if no one could separate them. The weak firelight turned into the most gentle veil at this moment, enveloping the two of them in the light. The dim yellow shadows and the quiet room were peaceful and warm. However, how long could this kind of tranquil time last? Both of them didn't sleep for the entire night. Compared to Xiao Su's full meal, Xiao Ho was depressed and cold. After returning from the relay station today, his entire person wasn't right. He didn't have any interest in doing anything. He couldn't even continue reading the newly collected loan book after flipping through a few pages. He couldn't help but throw it to the side and rub his temples. There were some things that you deliberately didn't want to think about, but they just loved to appear in your mind. He recalled Yu Qingxi leaning on her body and saying those words intimately and gently. She also had a bashful look. This scene made him unable to help but feel angry. However, he then recalled that when he left, Little Rascal's face was filled with sadness, as if she was the one being bullied. When her hand left his sleeve bit by bit, he felt as if something had been severed between the two of them. This gave him an extremely uneasy feeling and also a bit of panic. "Xiao Ho, I helped you so much, but you wronged me. If it wasn't for you, I wouldn't have fought." Those were the words she said when she was extremely aggrieved after being scolded by him for teaching those two hoodlums a lesson. His heart softened when he thought about how she looked like she wanted to say something when she left today. Could it be that he had wronged her again? When it came to the matter of Yu Qingxi, he was indeed too unperturbed. It was as if his past self, who could remain calm and collected even when his enemy provoked him, had slowly lost his patience in front of her. He was becoming less and less like himself. He would only feel this way when he was facing her. This made him feel shocked, but at the same time, he felt that it was only natural. Little Rascal should be asleep by now, but he suddenly really wanted to see her. The green robe flashed under the moonlight and disappeared. When he reappeared, he was already in Pang Zhijing's room. Pang Zhijing couldn't sleep for the entire night due to her emotional turmoil. She had just fallen asleep, her eyes were red and swollen, and her nose was red. When Xiao Ho stood in front of her bed, he saw her pitiful appearance. He was stunned for a moment before sitting down on her bed. He couldn't help but reach out to touch her eyes as he murmured, "Are you crying for me?" Because she didn't sleep well, Pang Zhijing let out a soft moan and slowly woke up when she heard movement. When Xiao Ho saw this, he immediately reached out to touch her sleeping acupuncture point. Her half-opened eyes slowly closed and she finally fell into a deep sleep. When he heard her breathing become long, he let out a sigh of relief. However, he was frightened by his own reaction. Earlier, he was actually afraid that she would wake up and see his emotions. Now that he thought about it, what was there to be afraid of? However, if that pair of clean and pure eyes opened, he wouldn't know how to face her. Perhaps he was afraid of the coldness in her eyes. He had said so many unpleasant things today, so she must hate him. His fingertips touched the skin on her face. It was smooth and soft, making him unable to part with it. At this time, her acupuncture point had already been sealed, so he wasn't worried that she would suddenly wake up again. Thus, he hugged her onto his lap and wrapped his hands around her shoulders and waist. He locked her in his embrace and helped her adjust the most comfortable angle before he leaned against the bed wall. The soft body in his embrace had become a treasure that he didn't want to let go of. At this moment, Pang Zhijing seemed to have seen something beautiful in her dream. Her lips curved into a faint smile. When he reached out to touch her face, she suddenly moved and hugged his waist. She leaned into his embrace and rubbed against his chest. He didn't know what she was dreaming about. Then he heard her mutter, "Thick skin, big bad guy, I hate you." Xiao Ho's hand paused as his gaze locked onto her face, as if to confirm what she had just said. However, Peng Zhijing, who had finished scolding him, had already fallen asleep contentedly. Xiao Ho didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Even in her dreams, she was scolding him. This was really making him unwilling to let go. Smelling the young girl's fragrance on her body, he felt a surge of tiredness. He couldn't help but lean his head on her shoulder as he hugged her and gradually fell asleep. All these years, his sleep had always been poor. However, when he saw her sleeping soundly just now, he couldn't help but have the urge to hold her in his arms. However, he followed his heart and did as he wished. At the same time, the long-awaited tiredness also came. The warm light shone on the bed, covering the two young bodies that were leaning against each other. Immediately, it gave them a faint glow. Their outstanding appearance, their otherworldly temperament, everything seemed so quiet and beautiful. Peng Zhijing slept very well. She thought that since she had slept so late last night, she would be very tired. However, she didn't expect to feel so refreshed. As expected, sleeping until late in the morning to make up for lost sleep was the most useful. However, why did she feel that her shoulder was a little sore, as if it had been pressed down by something heavy the entire night? She rubbed it and sighed. It must be a stiff pillow. When one was unlucky, even water would be stuck between one's teeth. At this moment, Lu came in with water. "Princess, you slept very well last night." "You slept all the way until now," Lu said with a smile. "Yeah, I thought it was very rare too." Peng Zhijing chuckled, then got up and prepared to wash up. However, she heard Lu say with some confusion, "But I slept very early last night. However, I didn't wake up when I was supposed to." How strange. When Peng Zhijing passed by her, she couldn't help but pat her shoulder. "I think you've overworked yourself. You're still growing. There's no harm in sleeping more. I don't need anyone to serve me." Lu's eyes were filled with tears when she heard that. She said gratefully, "Princess, you treat me so well." Seeing the tears in her eyes, Peng Zhijing paused. She couldn't help but think that after yesterday, there were only 2 days left. If she disappeared, what would Lu do? Perhaps she could ask Qin Yan to help look after her.